Flag salute.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Tom Collins.
Here.
Clem Wozleski. Rich Patterson.
Here.
Mike Cristaldi. Jim Galantino.
Here.
Margaret Gubernalty. Craig Palmisano. Despina Hess. Remy Pelosi. Joe DiGirolamo. Ron Grupo.
here.
Mike Richmond.
Here.
This meeting is being held in accordance with due public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the press, and a copy of same has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that should you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form which informs you regarding the timing of receiving building permits and mercantile licenses. At the end of your case tonight, please see the board administrator to sign the 2 information sheets.
Make a motion
For what?
for the minute.
I'd like to hear a motion for the approval of the minutes of the June 28th meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to hear a motion for the approval of decisions and resolutions. Number 30, 2018, Joe Tozzi. Number 31, 2018, Randy Grossman. Number 32, 2018, Vincent Caputo.
I'll make that motion.
Tom?
I second.
Clem? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion passes. First case tonight is Richard and Leslie Steinberg, 27 Harbor Lane, Block 709.02, Lot 32, in the S50 district to grant a C variance relief for front yard setback, side yard setback, front yard coverage, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. Galantino, you need to be sworn in.
Mr. Galantino, you're acting as a board member, but because Roger McLaren is not here, you're just going to read his reports? Is that?
That's it.
Is that your role? Okay, I don't think you're going to be testifying then. You're as a board member, so I think we can just go into the. You're reading Roger's reports.
That's all.
You're not testifying you're not a planner or an engineer.
Oh, so he doesn't need to be sworn in at all?
No, I think he's
Oh,
just
okay.
filling in so we can get them into the record.
Okay.
Ready to proceed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The application is Richard and Leslie Steinberg, 27 Harbor Lane, Block 709.02, Lot 32. It's an S50 zone. It's a FEMA Elevation 8. Background, the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to add off-street parking and a front yard porch. Some nonconforming condition arise as part of the proposal or an outline below. 5,000 square foot lot, existing 6,700 square feet, proposed 6,711 square feet, no variance. Lot width, no variance. Lot depth, no variance. Front porch, variance. Variance is for 8.43, proposed is 8.43, but the required is 19.2. Minimum side yard deck is 8 foot. He's proposed 6.64, that requires a variance. Combined side yard is 18.5. He has existing 20.7, proposes 17.44. And the next variance is front yard landscaping area. It's a 60% minimum, 50% minimum. Existing is 69.5, proposed is 43.15. All right, I think I read all the variances. Waivers requested, no waivers requested. That's my report.
You want to go over the comments?
Where's the comment? Make it that. All right, comments are the front yard setback requirement does not meet the prevailing likely caused by the unique shape of the lot. The plans do not indicate this to be a variance, but is an expansion of non-conforming setback. A hardship variance exists. Number 2, the side yard setback to the front porch requires a variance as it does not meet the minimum required. A hardship variance exists. The combined side yard setbacks require a variance if it does not meet the minimum required. 37% of the average lot width, a hardship variance exists. The front yard landscaping reduction and variance is a function of the added driveway to provide the required off-street parking. Some further mitigation would be beneficial, but also may be difficult to achieve. Please explain what vegetation is to be removed. There is a 10-foot wide, 5-foot on each property, sanitary sewer main easement on the shared property line with Lot 31. The proposed trash enclosure should be relocated off of the easement. No other structure shall be constructed within the easement. No variance relief or waiver relief found retains recommendations. The variances being sought require testimony from the applicant to satisfy C1 and C2 criteria where appropriate, including positive, negative criteria components. So I think it explains that the hardship. We have to go over that.
All good, I'll have to do anything?
I did all your work for you.
Thanks.
I'm tired. Can I go home?
Thank you, Mr. Galantino, Mr. Patterson, members of the board. My name is Chris Balance, and I represent the Steinbergs who are here
Give me a copy.
this evening with respect to their application for their property at 27 Harbor Lane. The application before you is for their existing home. It's really so they can have some outside living space to the front of the house and be out of the elements, so to speak, the insects back there, with some of the surrounding conditions being Mini Creek and some of the areas around it. The other variance that they're seeking is front yard landscaping to add 2 parking spaces where none currently exist. And Mr. Steinberg will tell you that in that area, believe it or not, parking is a premium on weekends, holidays, and the spaces could be used without giving up the on-street spaces. With that, let me have Mr. Steinberg testify. I know you have a full agenda. Mr. Fenwick could not be here. I told Mr. Steinberg that in light of the hardships that exist, he and I could probably handle it without a professional.
Mr. Steinberg, just come up, state your name and address for the record, and I'll swear you
If
in.
there's something wrong, just tell me.
Richard Steinberg, 27 Harbor Lane, Margate.
And do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Rich, you
Take the
guys-
mic, Chris.
I'm sorry, you guys are the owners, you and Leslie are the owners of the Harbor Lane property?
34 years now,
You raised your family there and been there since, I guess, Harbor Lane was developed?
indeed.
Could you talk into the microphone, Mr. Steinberg?
Go
Yes.
right now. Sorry. Rich, one of the proposals that we have this evening is for front yard setback and side yard setback for a new screened-in front porch. How did that idea come about, and why is it that you'd like to have that as an amenity at home?
Well, the plans today started with actually us trying to beautify our house. We've been there for 34 years, it feels longer. And we wanted to, never been happy with the exterior appearance. And we suggested to our architect, how can we increase the appearance of the house? First, we tried awnings, but Sandy took those down, and so he came up with what I think is a beautiful plan, which is a front porch, which we've always loved the idea of. Even though we have room in the back, we feel a front porch is inviting and adds to the architectural appearance of a house. And then the parking, which is really difficult in the cul-de-sac that we have. I didn't realize it until this application, but we don't even have one parking space that is other than the driveway. And the driveway, I think, is shorter than what is a standard space. So technically, other than the driveway, we have no parking. And it got much worse because there's a fire hydrant that was on the right side of the house that was moved to the left side in front of our house. So now we can't park where we used to park, and we lost a space. So we have one space on the street and basically one in the driveway, and our car sticks out. So
Let's stick with the parking then, since we're going in that order. I mentioned earlier, and you had told me that parking back in the Harbor Lane sometimes becomes crowded, the spaces
Oh, yes.
become unavailable. Could you comment
Yes.
on why that is?
yes, well, it's the cul-de-sac, and there's a lot of driveways, and many of the driveways have in and out. They're like U-shaped, so you can't park in front of the driveway on either side. So unless you're the homeowner, which you have many spaces, there's not spaces allotted for the balance. And me being one without that U-shape, I don't have but the driveway.
And you previously had a space in front of the house, but that was recently taken away, so to speak, by the relocation of the fire hydrant to right in front of your house.
Correct, yes.
So right now, are there any spaces in front of the house or none?
There's one space in front.
And there was two previously?
There was two.
Now, you.
Chris, it doesn't even look like a legal space in front of the house.
It will be, right now it's not a legal space.
That's what I mean. There's no parking at this place, none.
I'm sorry, so I meant the driveway space right now on property is not conforming.
But the street doesn't look like it's
Well,
18
that could be,
feet.
I didn't look,
Yeah.
that could very well be. So the two spaces that you're seeking front yard landscape variance for are necessary.
Indeed, yes.
Okay, and in light of the fact there's no on-street parking there, you look at that as somewhat of a hardship.
It is,
Okay,
yeah.
and, the rest of the property, the landscaping conforms in all respects.
Yes, I believe so.
The landscaping is being removed from these two spaces to the right of the front door as you look at it. That's grass. Anything else? What's being
It's
removed?
grass, it's concrete.
Concrete and grass mixture?
Yeah, there's a grass beyond where the concrete is on the right side, yes.
And there
Yes.
is a buffering landscape
there.
border along the side property line, is that
Yes.
right? So those spaces won't impede or impact upon the neighbors to the right.
No, no.
And the curb cut that you're going to use, that's an existing curb cut, so no additional street parking is affected.
Correct.
Okay, let's talk about the front porch then, that you started to say that Mr. Fenwick thought that might help enhance the appearance in front of the house.
Indeed, yes.
And also give you some space outside. Is there anything else you want to tell us about that porch and necessity for it, the desire?
Well, the porch actually, right now, there's a small porch that is above the door, and we're looking to extend the porch, the new porch, to no further than what is already existing.
So the front yard setback will be consistent with what it is now?
Correct.
And that's just
Yes.
to the porch? The front yard setback to the house doesn't change?
Right.
It's the same with respect to the side yard setback, it's only as to the porch, is that right?
Yes.
And as to the side yard setback,
That's where
it's
the
really
change-
just a
that's
small
the whole-
corner at the front of the porch that encroaches.
Correct.
A substantial portion of the porch does in fact meet the 8-foot side yard setback.
Yes.
Do you see, and also on that side, there's also a landscape buffer provided in between your house and the house on the left side,
Yes.
so there won't be any impact to that neighbor.
No, no, no.
And both your neighbors are aware of this proposal,
Yes, they both been, we discussed it with all the neighbors.
and none of them have voiced any
No,
objection?
no.
Do you see these variances as impacting any of the neighbors, or as impacting Margate zoning ordinance, which you're familiar with, or zone plan?
Only to the positive.
Thank you. I have nothing more, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question. Is there a problem with the telephone pole there? Does that interfere in any way? It's on the picture.
It looks it.
No.
Look at the picture, Chris.
Picture that I took? Will that interfere with the two spaces proposed?
Will that interfere with the access to the driveway or anything, or?
I think it's been designed assuming that telephone pole stays there.
All right,
It's not a telephone, it's a light.
Actually, it's a light stanchion.
It's a light.
whatever, it's there.
Chris, the fire hydrant you mentioned,
Yes.
I haven't seen on photos.
We'll see the yellow.
In front of the tree, it's red in front of the tree. And the curb is painted yellow there, Clem.
Yeah, but the yellow.
It's bright red, just like your shirt.
Because you can't park there, fire.
Lose that big magnolia?
Oh, no.
What?
So
No.
that makes this.
It sure looks
He
it.
had a legal spot.
No.
We don't
And
know.
then shrubbery along that right side will stay?
Yes.
Talking about- yes.
All that shrubbery,
Yes.
the buffer between the houses?
I believe that's not ours.
That's the neighbors.
It's on the other side of the pole.
But the magnolia tree looks like it's in your property,
This tree.
right in the middle of the driveway.
No, the big tree behind the fire hydrant, Greg?
No, no.
No, it's back the driveway,
It's over here.
The one up against the house?
the new driveway.
It's over here.
The one up against the house?
It's here.
No.
When I was on the site,
It would be to the right of the new driveway.
I don't think it's theirs. I don't think that tree is yours,
it
is
probably
it?
has to go.
This
I
tree
see
Here,
it.
That tree's not ours.
to the right of the light stanchion? To the right of the light stanchion? That's not their tree. It stays.
There will be a new curb cut.
I don't think so.
I think the existing curb cut's,
It looked like it was off,
I think it's just gonna be used on a different angle, that's all.
looks like a lot different angle on the print. It shows brickwork there. The curb cut's gonna have to come down to where the light pole is. The curb cut definitely is gonna have to change.
Who said that?
That may be, that may be, but if it does, I really don't think that it does.
Did you go there?
What?
Not gonna,
If it does, it's ignoring curb
It's
cut.
not gonna have to.
all right, okay.
It'll be fine.
I think so.
Rich?
Yes, sir.
Is that rear porch, need a rear yard setback?
The rear porch is existing. There's nothing proposed in the back. Nothing proposed in the back.
Oh, okay.
No.
It doesn't show on the coverage value.
Mr. Fenwick's not here to yell at. What does it say?
This second floor roof over the porch, Chris, is that a flat roof?
It'll be flat.
That's gonna be a flat roof. There's no plan on putting a door up there, is there?
There's
On
no-
the second floor?
No, no.
Chris, where's the landscaping loss going to be in the front yard? If the trees are staying,
Yes,
On
there's
both
some-
sides?
There's some grass to the right of the front door
right?
where the new pavers are shown. So
Okay.
that's the landscaping that's gonna be lost. The landscaping up against the house where the porch is gonna be. That's most of it.
Okay.
Landscaping back in.
We are, we're taking some out.
And just so the board knows, there's some concrete to the back of the house on the left that's being replaced with grass to make up some of the landscaping that's gonna be lost. And that's noted on a note on the top of the plan to the left. Removal of existing concrete.
Rich, the one big tree in the front's gonna stay?
Yes.
Anything else from the board?
That's all I have.
Anyone here from the public like to comment? Any questions? Public portion is closed. Does the board have any further comments or questions? What? Removal. Chris, we're gonna make it a condition, the removal of the concrete, okay? That he proposes?
What concrete, I'm sorry?
The one that you propose to remove back here?
That comes out?
Yeah.
Shown on the plan?
Yeah,
Absolutely,
all right.
And Chris, you're okay with everything else in Roger's report?
yes.
Okay. Someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following: the front yard setback to the porch of 8.43 feet or 19.2 feet is required. A side yard setback to the porch of 6.64 feet where 8 feet is required. A combined side yard setback to the porch of 17.44 feet where 18.5 feet is required. A front yard landscaping variance to permit 43.15% coverage where 60% is required. The conditions will be that portion of concrete in the rear of the property, as shown on the plans, will be removed, as the plans indicate, and the applicant will comply with all other conditions set forth in Mr. McLaren's report dated July 26, 2018.
I'll make that motion.
Tom? Mike?
Tom Collins?
This case is actually not that difficult. The size and the type of the lot you have really does create a hardship, being in the cul-de-sac and backing up to Bug City, which I understand. I think the way you're designed it, you're actually going to improve the neighborhood. It's going to be aesthetically nice for you, but for your neighbors too. And you're going to provide a relief for parking for yourself, which also benefits your neighbors. I see no detriments to this. I think it fits what we're looking for in our master plan, and I vote in favor.
Clem Wozzeski?
I don't see any negatives to this at all. I think it's architecturally a vast improvement over what's existing. I can understand why the Steinbergs want to approve it. I think their architect did a fine job, and I approve it.
Rich Patterson?
I also approve the application. Not in all cases, but in this case especially, he really has 0 legal parking spaces, which was not his fault, and he's creating 2 or 3 or whatever he's getting, 2. I see no no detriment to the neighborhood. We never like to see front yard landscaping being minimized, but I think what you're doing there makes up for that, so I approve.
Mike Cristaldi?
As with Mr. Patterson, I agree. I see absolutely no negative with it. I think it's a great design improvement on the house. And I love screened-in porches, so I vote in favor of.
Jim Galantino?
The applicant and his attorney did show a hardship. I don't see a problem granting this variance. Great application. Approved.
Margaret Gubernati?
I'm in agreement with the other board members as well. I see no negative impact. It's actually based upon the unique lot size, the parking spots are a benefit to the neighborhood, and the house looks aesthetically really, really nice, so I approve of the application.
Mike Richmond?
Yeah, I think the side yard setback is a hardship because of the size of the lot, and I think it's a vast improvement. Supplying 2 more legal parking spots, I'm going to vote yes.
Application passes 7-0.
Okay. Rich, and the next one, Mr. Collins. Rich is it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Right.
Come on over.
Mr. Collins is recusing himself from the next case. Next case is Michael and Nora Epson, 8106 Marshall Avenue, Block 609.01, Lot 35, in the S40 District to grant a C variance relief for side yard setback, building coverage, and combined side and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. Galantino?
The applicant is seeking a relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to construct an enclosed porch or a 3-season room in order to provide additional space without being required to elevate or reconstruct. The addition will require variances indicated below. The current and proposed use is a single-family dwelling. Okay, so it's a side yard setback deck, whereas the required setback is 10 feet, 4.1 exists, 4.1 is proposed, expansion and non-conforming setback. Combined side yard setback is deck, whereas the required combined setback is 22 feet, 17.1 feet scaled exists, and 17.1 feet scaled is proposed. Expansion of a non-conforming setback. Building coverage, whereas 30% building coverage is the maximum permitted, 28.6 exists, scaled, 39.9% is proposed, scaled. Waivers, a waiver should be requested and granted for providing a copy of the area mapping all lots within 20 feet. Comments, the side yard setback variance could be avoided by a moving addition over the 5.9 feet. The combined yard setback variance would be avoided if the addition was moved as well. However, the interior space is being lined as the most practical manner. Landscape coverage is still meeting the required minimum. There was not any zoning chart provided. Building coverages and other coverages were scaled. The proposed enclosed space is below base flood elevation, should not be in conditioned space. Both C1 and C2 criteria need to be satisfied in this application. There is no hardship variance as part of the application. Positive and negative criteria will need to be satisfied.
Thank you, Mr. Galantino. Members of the board, I represent Mike and Nora Epson with respect to their application this evening for their house. Mike, come on up. For their house at 8106 Marshall Avenue, identified in the tax map as Lot 35 in Block 609.01, seeking the variances from the S40 zoning district requirements as set forth. Mike Epson is with me and is going to testify. As you can see, the variances that we are requesting deal with building coverage and setbacks as a result of a new 3-season covered enclosed porch or deck, we will call it. It has a roof and walls around it, but is considered a deck as a 3-season room. It's a room that Mike and Nora really need, having unexpectedly taken over, so to speak, as parents, their grandchildren who are teenagers now, and a home that they thought they might be able to retire in comfortably now appears a little too small when you add two teenagers to the mix. This room will provide some space for those guys to hang out, and these guys to hang out without really interfering with each other too much and allowing for privacy. With that, let me have Mike introduced. He can talk really about the plans as he prepared them, and hopefully they were thorough enough. I know there's about 10 different sheets, but we wanted to give you as much information as possible and do this on a budget, so to speak, so it's affordable and so it's well presented, however.
Sure.
Mike's going to testify.
Mr. Epson, just state your name and address for the record, and I'll swear you in.
Mike Yepson, 8106 Rockville Avenue.
And you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mike, you and Nora are the owners of the property at 8106 Marshall Avenue,
Yes, sir.
and how long have you owned that property?
4 years.
And that's your year-round residence?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the application that you're asking for tonight, is variance is related to a three-season enclosed porch/deck, we'll call it,
Correct.
and that's to the rear of the house?
Yes, sir.
And the side yard setback variance that you're asking for is to line up with the existing side yard setback at the rear.
Yes.
And the other variance, I believe, and I don't have the exact number, is a building coverage variance?
3.9% over.
Over, and that's as a result of the porch, and since it's covered, it does count toward
Correct.
coverage.
Yes.
Okay, otherwise, your landscaping meets with the requirements.
Yes, sir.
And if you would, and I don't want to do all the talking, give the board a little bit of your background and why this proposal comes before them, and the variances need to be requested.
When we bought the house, obviously, it was fine for me and the wife. Family circumstances has it as we now have custody and are raising 2 of our grandsons, 19 and a half, 13 and a half. 19 and a half in college, 13 and a half in high school. It's become tight. And them, when they have friends over, there's just nowhere for them to hang out. It really puts a little bit of stress on the wife and I, so we just need somewhere where they can just be with their friends and give us a break. A place to do their homework, a game room, anything that they can do to less stress for us. We thought we were out of the family business. Well, we're back into it. So, obviously, if this was before this, maybe we would look for a bigger house, but we have what we have.
Mike, you've decided how to proceed with respect to this addition, understanding it's a three-season room. That will be sufficient for the needs?
It'll give us at least 9 months, maybe 10 months of good quality use out of it, yes.
And obviously, by adding this one room, that obviates the need for you either to build a second floor or to look for a house elsewhere.
Correct.
And
This was the best option.
When we talk about the coverage variance being just over 3% over, obviously, you're going to trade that off with more density. The trade-off would be more density by way of building a second floor.
Well, the second floor would be
2.5 stories, which is permitted.
right. The second floor would be an issue because my ceiling joists are only 2x6s. When the house was built, the rafters are only 2x6. So to go up, I got to tear the whole roof off. Cost, logistical issues, it's a nightmare.
So for you, it's really a better option, but your neighborhood really, there is a proliferation of the one-story style ranchers
Oh
that
yeah,
you have.
we fit right in.
So it'll be, keeping it one-story remains consistent with the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the setback variance to the rear, the side yard setback, you're maintaining the existing side yard setback as is?
Correct. We're just running straight down the line of the house.
Okay, and it was mentioned by Roger that the addition could be moved over to comply. You've looked at that, and that doesn't really work, and tell the board why.
No, because what we've proposed is it lines up correctly with the walls, and to move it over, I have my tankless boiler and hot water heater pipes, exhaust right there. I have my dryer vent right there, my electrical panel right there, the utility room's right there. It's impossible to move it whatsoever to the right.
Without adjusting all those utilities?
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
Where you have it located now, none of those items are affected.
No,
Okay, and the rear yard setback still conforms.
absolutely.
And you've designed the room so as not to even be noticeable from the street, so there's really no change to the neighborhood.
No one should be able to see it.
Do you think then, your neighbors to the right, they're aware of what you're doing?
Everyone's aware of it. They have no problems. One of my neighbors is here now, Paul, across the street. Doesn't appear to have an issue with it.
I can't think of anything else. You have a landscape buffer to the right protecting that neighbor,
Yes,
and otherwise, like I said, otherwise it's really not noticeable or no
not at all.
impact.
No, sir.
That's all I have, Mr. Patterson.
Any questions from the board?
Please.
Relative to moving this
Sliding,
layer
sliding it over?
if you will, away from the property line.
Yes.
On the drawing that you
Mike.
prepared,
Turn his mic
assume
on,
you
please.
prepared,
Yes.
the adjacent spaces in the existing house are master bedroom and existing master bath. And yet you talk about utility room and it doesn't show that way.
What doesn't show?
Well, the utility room doesn't even show in this sketch.
Where the back door is where the utility room is.
Mike, usually.
But that doesn't go into the,
No, it doesn't,
room.
but the room can't move over, it would affect, that's part, the door's part of, the back door's part of that utility room.
well, it looks to me like you've got, assuming this is to scale, 5 or 6 feet between the wall and the door.
Correct, and that's where all my exhausts are, from the utility room. The boiler exhaust is right there, the hot water heater exhaust, the dryer exhaust, and the electric panels in that wall.
The electric panel shouldn't be a problem. The exhaust could probably go through the roof. Also, the only interior access to this three-season room appears to be through the master bedroom.
Correct. That's the only option I have.
Well, it's
And
going to
since
be a
it's
little
three-season
tough if you're
room and
taking,
they're gonna be using it during the day, it's not an issue for us. And it has an outside sliding door it's gonna have.
well, somebody in the three-season room wanted to use the bathroom, they'd either have to go through your bedroom or outside and back in again. Doesn't make sense to me.
Nothing else.
Anything else on the board? Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment? Please come up, state your name, and be sworn in, please. Use the microphone.
Sure. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Shugsta,
Be sworn in first.
How do you spell your last name?
Schugsta,
And your address?
8109 Marshall Avenue.
And do you swear affirm testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I live at 8109 Marshall Avenue. That property is immediately across the street from Mike and Nora. That property at 8109 has been in our family for 45 years, since Mahoney built them back in 1973. So we've seen owners come and owners go at Mike and Nora's property. And when Mike and Nora moved in, that property has gone through a transformation. They have really done a great job in terms of improving the property, both the exterior, the landscaping. They really are an asset to the neighborhood. So I have every confidence that whatever variance they're requesting will be in equally good taste and equally fit in well with the property and the neighborhood.
Thank you.
And I commend Mike and Nora for the task of taking on 2 grandchildren and going through that process. So they're to be deeply commended for their efforts.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments, questions? Public portion is closed.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
No further comments from the board. Would you read a motion, please?
Sure. Chris, you're okay with everything in the report?
Yes.
Looks like there's a waiver request for providing an area map showing that everyone within 200 feet.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So we need a motion for C variance relief for side yard setback to the deck of 4.1 feet, where 10 feet is required. Combined side yard setback to the deck of 17.1 feet, where 22 feet is required. A building covered variance of 33.9%, where 30% is the permitted maximum. The applicant's requesting a waiver from providing an area map showing all the properties within 200 feet, and the conditions will be all those conditions set forth in Mr. McLaren's report of July 26th, 2018.
I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mike,
I'll second.
Craig?
Clem Wasleski.
Well, I think there's probably a much better solution to this problem. than the one we've been shown. But I'm not in a position to redesign it for them. The closeness to the side yard is really the problem as I see it, but nobody seems to be objecting to it. And I would probably vote against it, except I have 2 teenage grandsons too. And they do present unique problems. I'll vote in favor.
Rich Patterson?
I'm looking at their rear yard, which is huge. I don't see this as being out of scale for the rear yard or for the neighborhood. I just, there's no neighbor on the right complaining. I just don't see a problem with this. I don't see any negatives that would outweigh any positives. I vote in favor of the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
Being known as Mr. Rogers and good for a neighborhood, and I'm just going to approve the thing.
What? Mr. Rogers?
That was a yes.
Yes.
Jim Galantino?
I vote yes for the application.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I do not see any negative criteria, no detriment to the public good. Certainly, the coverage variance could be density if you wanted to put up a second floor. I think that keeping it as a rancher is more consistent with the neighborhood. The side yard setback does line up, and I think I have the same house actually on Marshall Avenue, so I know what he means about the room and where it works. And as we drove by today looking at the property, the garage was open and the TV was on, and I guess there was maybe the kids were in there or whatever, so I could see it as something that would benefit your family, and I vote in favor.
Mike Richmond?
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Gubernalty. I think that by having the addition in the back, it really doesn't have any impact on the neighborhood rather than putting a second floor on, and I think it's a hardship case. I'm going to vote yes.
Application passes 7-0.
Next case is Richard and Lori Goldstein, 23 North Delavant Avenue, Block 204.02, Lot 1, in the S25 district. To grant a C variance relief for...
Excuse me,
What?
Craig Palmisano, may I have your vote for that,
I was
please?
going to say, why didn't
Yeah, I thought you skipped me, and I vote in favor of the application.
7-0, right?
Yes, now it's 7-0.
Somebody's counting right there.
Where was I? Next case is Richard and Lori Goldstein, 23 North Delavant Avenue, Block 204.02, Lot 1, in the S25 district, to grant a C variance relief for front yard setback, side yard setback, combined side yard, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. Galantino?
Good evening. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to expand a first floor porch and a second floor deck on the corner property. The applicant is also proposes to expand a second floor over the garage. The property has 2 frontages, and lot widths are calculated per lot coverage. Several variances are required as listed described below. Looks like it's like a 25-foot square foot required, 3,338 square feet existing, 3,330 square feet, no variance. Read that.
Just read the yeses.
All right, so front yard setback porch, whereas 5 feet are a minimum, front yard setback, 1.8 is prevailing, 1.4 feet exists and is proposed required a variance. Front yard setback, second floor, whereas a 5 foot are the minimum front yard setback, 1.8 is prevailing, 1 feet exist and proposed requiring a variance.
I got 1.4.
Where's that at? This is on this thing. 1.4. 1.4.
Yes. I got 1.4 for those two.
1.4. 1.4. What did I say?
1.8.
Oops. Oh, no, this is right here. 1.8 prevailing and 1.4 exists. I'll read that back.
Oh, I'm sorry, you got, no, it doesn't, Existing is 1.4, proposed 1.4. 5
Eric,
foot's what's
is this
required.
is this concurring? The
Yeah,
front yard
there's-
setback, 1.8 is required, or is it 1.4?
1.4. And we're not, the expansion is not going to occur to make that any greater. So what existing and proposed will remain the same.
All right, so it's
But
1.
5 feet is required.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the prevailing is 1.8, but since that's below 5 feet, 5 feet's required.
That's right.
Okay. Moving on. Minimum side yard setback, Delavan Avenue frontage, whereas 10 feet are the minimum side yard setback, 8.9 feet exist, 6.4 is proposed, requiring a variance due to the width of the front yard's frontage. Minimum combined side yard setback, whereas 18.5 feet is the minimum calculated combined side yard setback, 20.2 feet exists, 17.6 feet is proposed, requiring a variance due to the width of the lot being 49.4 feet. Waivers requested, none requested. Comments, the minimum front yard setback requirements are not being met for the building, so a variance is required. The average setbacks are less than 2 feet. The 1.4 setback will now skew the average.
Will
but it
not skew.
Will not skew the average, but it leaves a reduced front yard. And the revision now extends the proposed deck much closer to the corner, possibly hindering site triangles. The minimum side yard setback on the Delavan Avenue is not being met. The combined side yard setbacks are not being met based on a lot width of 49.9 feet. Use a shorter of the two widths. The side of the property with the driveway is being widened to more provide a more usable driveway. The survey is older than the older one, 1 year or so. The statement from the applicant must be made that the survey accurately represents the status of the premises today. The survey is not sealed by a professional land surveyor. The source of the front yard setback information has not been provided. The garage, since it is attached, counts as a building coverage. The floor areas of the first floor and the second floor shall be provided. The shape of the lot is non-symmetrical and provides some level of difficulty in designing within the allowable envelope. 11, the revised extension of the porch did not change the front yard landscaping percentage in the zoning chart. However, I believe that the front yard landscaping is not being met along the Delavan Avenue, especially with the extension. That's it. Go ahead, Eric.
Hey, Eric,
Thank
just so you know real quick, I don't think you were here for anyone in the public. Mr. McLaren's out ill. Jimmy Galantino, as a board member, is just voluntarily reading his
Very
reports
well.
of the
Thank you,
record.
Mr.
And I'll probably say that one more time tonight.
This microphone is not working great, so I'm going to try to speak into the small one. But Eric Goldstein, on behalf of the applicant, Rick and Lori Goldstein, just by way of background with regard to this application, as the board is clearly aware, this area of Delavan Avenue is being developed pretty rapidly. Across the street from the Goldstein house, there are 2 new homes proposed to be built. There's a brand-new home that's just been built behind, and generally the surrounding area is becoming tear-downs and rebuilds. Goldsteins, who are ultimately going to retire to Margate and set up shop here permanently, thought about what they could do with the property, and they didn't want to do a cookie-cutter tear-down. They really liked the house. It's got some history. They wanted to keep it, but they wanted a little extra space with regard to the porch, a little extra space within the house, which is the purpose of this application. Rick Goldstein is also an attorney, a land use practitioner, probably could do a better job on this than me, but as everyone knows, when you do stuff yourself, you always kind of get lost in your own head. So I'm putting it on for him. Purpose of this interesting design that Mr. Weiss put together is simply to make their existing house have a little more room. And as Mr. Weiss is going to testify, what we have here is a classic house with a hardship that needs a variance where they don't want to tear down and rebuild. So with that being said, prior to Mr. Weiss testifying, I think Rick and Lori, maybe Rick, I don't know who's going to speak, has something to say about what they intend to do here and why they're coming before the board for the variance. So,
Please state your name and then be sworn in.
Thank you. Richard Goldstein, 23 North.
Delavan. Do you
Yeah,
swear
Delavan.
do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric did a really good job at giving the summary, but I just want to give you a little bit of background as to what got us to appear before you this evening. We bought our house 6 years ago. It's the first time that we owned a house at the New Jersey shore. And we found out that we both love the house and we love the neighborhood and we want to move here and make Margate and this house our permanent residence. Unfortunately, the house isn't really adaptable as it exists today to be a permanent residence, and we want to make it more conducive for that permanent use. And so what we're doing really is increasing, adding one bedroom, adding some storage space that's needed, and enhancing our outdoor living space. Since we bought the house, there's been a lot of changes in our immediate area. Directly behind us, there was, at the corner of Clarendon and Oak Grove, there was a small Cape Cod and a very large open lot. That since has been subdivided. A large house has been built on the corner lot with a very small rear yard. And at the rear of that house, right on our property line, there is a large storage shed that is about 10 feet wide and 9 feet high, sitting on about a 10-inch concrete pad. And so that has really closed in our backyard. There is, at the far end of our yard, when we moved into the house, there's a solid brick wall, which is the garage for our next-door neighbor. And then in that second lot that was subdivided on Clarendon, an approval has been granted to develop that lot. It has not yet been developed, but the approval includes a garage, again, right up against our property line. So our backyard that was, when we bought the house, a very open and breezy area, has suddenly become very closed in and confined. And that is what has led us to the desire to increase the size of our front porch to make more open, livable area that we can enjoy, especially when we're permanent residents. In addition, as Eric mentioned, on the opposite side of our house, directly across from us on Delavan, there was a single-family home. It's since been demolished. That lot was also subdivided and has been approved for 2 homes where there was 1. So the area is rapidly changing, but we really love what we have and want to adapt it to make it more conducive to our own uses. And so we asked Peter to put together this plan. Our goal was to do a minimal expansion to preserve the character of the house, the character of the neighborhood, and to make it livable for us. There are a couple of unique circumstances also that I'd just like to touch on for the board with regard to the property. As noted in Roger's memo, the lot is an irregularly shaped lot, and it also sits at the intersection of Oak Grove and Delavan, which is an irregular intersection. The house is on our street. So I'm on the, I'm at the corner of Oak Grove and Delavan, and I'm on the, from that intersection, I'm south of Oak Grove. So the 4 houses next to me, also south of Oak Grove, all are duplexes. They all have 0-foot setbacks. So although my setback is an existing non-conforming setback, it's a larger setback than any of the houses on my side of the street currently have. In addition, I mentioned that the intersection is a unique intersection. The Delavan Avenue, north of Oak Grove, is narrower than south of Oak Grove. In addition, it's not a traditional 90-degree T intersection. There's an offset, and so as a result of that unusual situation, the sidewalk on Delavan, north of Oak Grove, lines up with the cartway, at the edge of the cartway, south of Oak Grove. So there's a kind of a real offset there, and therefore our sidewalk at our house and our existing front porch at our house don't line up with the sidewalk and the front porch of the next block down from us. We are set back further, and therefore I believe that there's no real impact on the surrounding area and on that intersection at Oak Grove. Also, we currently have a number of large, we have a lot of landscaping, but a number of large trees at that portion at the intersection where we're proposing to expand our porch. That heavy landscaping will come down, and if anything, I think it will enhance the area because it will open up this whole intersection area and make it a more open feeling. I think that that's, basically, and one other thing is that our original plan that was submitted included a freestanding column to support the second floor, this addition on the second floor. We decided to continue our application last month and had the plan redone because we thought that rather than have this freestanding column, it would be more aesthetically appealing to build that column into the front porch, which is why we slightly expanded the front porch so that the column is incorporated into the porch and not freestanding.
So this is important, very important. The prior design had the porch, a pretty large gap, and then a column just sticking out in the middle of the yard, correct?
That's correct.
And when Pete looked at it and you looked at it, you thought maybe the better way to make it less of an odd-looking column would just be to tie that into the house, so now it doesn't look so bizarre being out in the middle of nowhere, but it also changed a little bit of the application. And just so everyone's aware, we did renotice and re-advertise once we made that change, and last month Mr. Mano said we don't have to, but based upon the change, we thought it was important that everyone be aware of exactly what we're going in for. So that's why we're here. I thought you can do a much better job than I could.
You were right, Mr.
Yeah.
Goldstein.
And that's
Most
everything.
people can.
And not true at all. Everything you said is correct, and I just would add that although we recognize when we slightly enlarged the porch towards Oak Grove that we were going to further extend that non-conforming condition into the setback, we decided that it was worth doing that because most of the porch extension is not encroaching on the setback. It's just a very small portion of it that does, which leads us to the additional variance that we're seeking tonight. So
That said, Mr. Weiss is prepared to walk us through what we're doing here, and obviously, if the board sees fit to grant the approval, the conditions of Mr. McLaurin's report regarding acknowledgement of the survey, that the conditions are the same, and any other conditions are going to be agreed upon by the applicant. So with that, we don't have a working mic here, however, so Pete's going to have to enunciate and
Good luck with that.
Eric, I'll try new batteries.
this doesn't come out.
Mr. Weiss, just state your name and address for the record. I'll swear you in.
Peter Weiss, 101 North Washington Avenue, Margate.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so the existing house is a two-story house. The first floor is the living space and 2 bedrooms. Currently, the second floor is just a large master suite. There's only 1 bedroom upstairs. So what we'd like to do on the first floor is add a small entry area, so when you come in the front door, you're not walking right into the stair. Extend the front porch laterally either way of the existing porch, which is more or less in the middle of the house, and adding 2 feet on the side of the garage to make a little more room for storage. On the second floor, we're going to add a bedroom on the left side, so we'll be up to a 4-bedroom house. Add a craft room, I guess you'd say, over the garage, and also extend the existing deck on the second floor out over the first floor, which will form a roof over the first floor deck. The average setback for front decks on that street is actually, within 200 feet, is actually 1.6 feet. We're currently 1.4 feet, so even though 5 foot is the default minimum, being at 1.4 feet, we're still consistent with the setbacks on the street.
And just to be clear, Mr. Weiss, there's no additional encroachment going further towards either street, correct? We're just going to keep it at what it is now, it just happens to be shorter.
There's no encroachment towards Delavan.
Correct.
Yes. One thing I wanted to point out is that even though it's a 50-foot street, the cartway on that particular block, which is the distance between the curbs, is 26, which is a little less than normal. What that means is there's an extra 2 feet of greenery, grass, between the curb and the front of the building, or the curb and the property line, because the distance becomes 12 feet where it's normally 10. So there's a little bit extra greenery there that you wouldn't have in most streets in Margate that are 50 feet wide. I want to touch a little bit about the minimum side yard on Delavan. This was unexpected, I guess, on my part. In the past, when you have a rectangular lot on a corner, I would take the smaller dimension of the lot and use that to establish the minimum side yard for either side. Roger apparently recently decided to start treating the streets separately. So, which kind of makes sense, but this is, you know, something new for me this time around. So we're proposing 6.4 feet where 10 is required because of the longer frontage on Delavan. With regard to the combined yard setback, we're requesting 17.6 where 18.5 is required. Again, I think that's less than a foot deviation, and that's offset by the fact that we're more than 24 feet from the neighbor to the south and 23 feet to the neighbor to the east. So our setbacks to the neighboring buildings are far greater than what you typically find in the S25 zone.
Mr. Weiss, as a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey, based upon your testimony, do you see any negative or detriments associated with Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein's application?
No.
And to the extent there would be any detriment associated therewith, would the positive greatly outweigh those detriments?
Yes, I think so.
Does the addition, so there's no, the addition doesn't trigger any variances, right? It's all about the
Well,
porch.
it does on the second floor because we're stretching towards the south, so yes.
But the combined side yard, is that what is affected?
And the minimum too, I guess, yes, on that side.
Okay.
But like I said, we're 20-something feet from the building next door to the south, so there's a big driveway there and a fair amount of space.
I think there's a lot of volume over there at the third level of the garage. Is that just going to be dead storage space?
Well, that was the owner's specific request to have extra space for storage, yes. That'll be attic storage.
Mr. Weiss, is there, with that volume, as Mr. Maslewski had indicated, any possibility of an additional bedroom or any kind of work to sneak in more space, or is it all going to be stored?
There's no access to it.
With pull-down
Other
stair?
than a pull-down stair, right.
Access could always be provided, though.
I guess somewhere down the road, I mean, it wouldn't be out of the question. It's not part of this. what
That
we're
we're not
proposing.
looking to slip something in where perhaps some livable space would be obtained. The Goldsteins aren't looking to go faster on the board.
Correct.
What are you going to do with all those decks?
Well,
If I can, the deck on the second floor is really, the purpose of it is to provide, we currently have an awning over the porch on the first floor, and the awning needs to be replaced, so we prefer to put a permanent covering over the porch instead of having the awning. So we decided the way that we would accomplish that would be to just expand. Right now, we have a deck on the second floor that's fairly narrow, but we thought just by expanding it and making it larger, it would provide the covering over the first floor and would look pretty. It's not, honestly, that we need all that deck space. We don't. It's my wife and me in the house, but we just thought that it was aesthetically pretty and the deck is already there, so we would expand it. And also, if I would just say, in terms of that attic space, I just wanted to note that the only way to get to that space is through a bathroom. You'd have to go into the bathroom to get there. So we wouldn't put a bedroom where somebody had to go through our bedroom and our bathroom in order to get there.
It's unusual because the only thing that stuck out to me is that attic space as well, because we're adding that room, the deck, I love the symmetry of it, so I think it's gonna be an improvement to the neighborhood. It's just that extra attic space. I'm trying to figure out, looks like we're topping off at 2911. How much extra is it over the rest of the roof line? Do we know that?
What are you doing?
About 5 foot higher than the main roof.
It's a full 5 all the way across.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the other board's feelings are. That's the only thing that's standing out.
It's just storage space, right?
Yeah.
So it's a high storage space.
Yeah.
Correct.
High attic.
There's no windows in it. No. What's the ceiling height in that attic?
Well, I have a line drawn, well, okay.
So by the time you put a collar beam in there,
You got an area maybe less than 8 feet wide where you have 8 foot of headroom. It's the only-
Just about the 8 foot.
Reduce the, master bed, reduce the volume. Tone the house down.
Pete, what's the setback on that? Is that the 23-foot side to the closest neighbor?
24 and a half,
24 and a half there?
yes.
Was the pitch the same as the other roof?
Good thing you got that.
It's a little steeper.
I got a long run.
If it's a serious problem for the board, I guess we can take a look at trying to take a few feet off of that area, but we were really trying to, we're coming from a big house, and we really are looking for as much storage as we can possibly get in the house. And that's why we did put that room over the garage, but, you know, and that will help a lot. But we thought that this dead space above would just give us a little bit more space for off-season clothes and for things that we just don't need on a regular basis.
Yeah, one thing you can't tell from this plan is there's no attic above the master bedroom. It's all vaulted ceiling. So the only attic space is on the right over the storage room, the craft room, and a little bit on the left side over the other bedroom. So the whole middle portion of the house has a vaulted ceiling inside.
I don't see the issue with a big attic space.
I don't either.
You got, we're trying to get more pitch roofs, and you got a nice pitch roof here, so I really don't see the.
And they're keeping an existing house.
Yeah. I mean, the only question I have is, I'm looking at the rear elevation, what's that little, look, is that like a, what's that little deck there, whatever it is? Is that for HVAC or? Huh? Is that HVAC?
Yeah, so the condensers, yeah.
Yeah. What is it?
Condensers, yeah.
HVAC.
Yeah, okay, all right.
All right. Unless there's any further questions, we would rest on the application.
Any questions from the board? Anyone here from the public like to please come forward, state your name, and be sworn in?
Paul Friedman,
Your address?
16 North Delavan Avenue.
Do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
For what it's worth, I live diagonally across from the house. It is a unique house. We love it. And it's always nice to get another permanent resident on Delavan Avenue. We've been here for 10 years. And the way Rick and Lori take care of that house and the grounds and the landscaping, it's a pleasure to watch them out there and watch them out there in the garden and everything. I've seen the plans, and I think that it's nothing but an asset to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in public? Public portion is closed. Any further comments from the board? Questions? Leo, would you read the motion?
Sure. Someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following. A front yard setback to the porch of 1.4 feet where 5 feet is required. Front yard setback to the second floor deck of 1.4 feet where 5 feet is required. Minimum side yard setback along the Delavan side of 6.4 feet where 10 feet is required, and a minimum combined side yard setback of 17.6 feet where 18.5 feet is required. And the applicant, as a condition, will comply with all conditions in Mr. McLaren's report dated July 11th, 2018, unless otherwise addressed tonight.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Jim?
Tom Collins?
You have a very unique property in a very unique neighborhood, and with the angles of the streets and the development going on, I think what you're going to do is really not going to have any negative impacts on the neighborhood. I only think it's going to enhance it. So as future building goes on, I think it's going to improve the neighborhood even more. I like your design. I think it was done very well, and I vote yes.
Clem Wozzeski?
Well, I would like to see the mass of the house reduced by doing something with the third attic level over the garage, but since it doesn't seem to bother anybody else, I'll go along with it. I'll vote yes.
Thank you.
Rich Patterson.
Well, as the applicant stated, I walked down on the north side of Oak towards the house, and the way that angle is in the street, because I was concerned when you said 1.4-foot setback. It means nothing from that angle. It provides no obstruction. And then on the other side of them, it looks like every house is on the sidewalk. So I see nothing wrong with this. I see preserving a house rather than building a new one, putting an addition on that's going to make it much nicer looking, and front porches make neighborhoods. So I see no detriments to this. I approve the application.
Mike Cristaldi.
I see no negative impact on the neighborhood either. The house could come down, there could be a three-story there. That would really be negative on the neighborhood. There's a lot more going in there. I vote yes on the application.
Jim Galantino.
I think the Goldsteins have been enough with all the construction that happened down there. I think I was over that place, about 15 times last year. I agree with the board. I think this really does keep the house in its state of the, the natural state of the house is beautiful, and I think that this is really going to be an asset for the neighborhood, and I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty.
I'm in agreement with the other board members. Aesthetically, it's certainly more pleasing. It is an irregularly shaped lot. There's no negative impacts to the neighbors. I mean, you certainly have enough room on both sides, and I approve the application.
Mike Richmond.
Yeah, like Mr. Goldstein said, the pretty much that whole block there comes out to the setback, so it's not like something that's unusual. And also, the addition is basically a storage space. It's not another bedroom, so I really don't see it having any negative impact on the bed yet.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you. And just by way of clarification, one thing which is going to be important to the Goldsteins, knowing that the board has no August meeting and there will be no resolution memorialized, they do want to get started with construction. They realize it will be at their own risk. I'm putting it on the record now that if they get started, it's at their own risk, but they want to get moving with their construction. So I would imagine they'll be into Mr. McLaren and Mr. Galantino before the resolution is memorialized in September. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Next case is 104 South Clarendon Avenue, Block 3.02, Lot 9, in the S30 District, to grant a C variance relief for front yard landscaping, third floor deck, height, coverage, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. Galantino?
Background, the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to elevate a non-conforming home on the beach block of South Douglas Avenue.
It's not Douglas Avenue. This is Clarendon Avenue. What? Are you looking at this? Yeah, I know, but this is the case, it's Clarendon Avenue.
All right, strike that. I'm sorry.
Typo.
It's a typo.
Did I do it?
South Clarendon. So it would be beach block of South Clarendon Avenue. Sorry for the confusion. The elevation of the house requires several variances, including but not limited to building coverage, height, AC unit, setbacks, landscaping coverage. The site currently contains a non-flood compliant residential structure. All right. You don't need to go over documents. Variance is required, third floor deck, whereas the third floor decks are not permitted at this location and one is proposed. Front yard landscaping, whereas 60% is required minimum percent of landscaping within the front yard setbacks. 50% is the minimum, including steps to access would be finished first floor, and 39.2% is proposed. Building height, whereas 30 feet from the BFE base flood elevation plus 4. The permitted maximum height and 32.5 feet is proposed. The C variance, as the difference is less than 10 feet or 10%, the residential height regulation map, flood damage prevention ordinance. Waivers requested, no waivers requested. Third floor decks in the ocean-sided Atlantic Avenue are proposed to be permitted to the new land use ordinance based on the adoption of the master plan. 2, the front yard landscaping reduction variance is a function of the wide driveways and steps within the front yard. Perhaps a reduction to the width of the driveway and any alleviate some of the landscaping requirements. A 10% allowance is provided within the ordinance for front steps used for entry to the finished first floor. The combined set yard setback is due to the construction of the new deck. 18.5 feet is required, 18 feet is provided. The variances has been eliminated. The rear yard setback requires a variance is another vertical expansion and non-conforming setback. 5, the building height exceeds allowable building height by less than a 10%, requiring a C variance. Currently at this location, our ordinances require first floors to be located at the minimum elevation of the BFE base flood elevation +3 to the underside of the flooring system, floor joist. The zoning for height starts at the BFE +4, or in this case of elevation 14, EL. The addition height is being driven by the request to provide parking below the structure. Also proposed is an ordinance revision to the allowance of an additional height to provide for parking below the building in order to create more open space. The application accomplishes that goal. The minimum distance between external walls of the principal structure triggers yet another variance due to the vertical expansion and the fact that the neighboring structures encroach onto the property in question by 0.2 feet. As for waivers, a waiver for providing a map of all properties within 200 feet was requested and could be granted. An additional waiver request is made for the use of a survey older than a year old. This too could be granted since the house will be demolished.
Wait,
Wait a minute. I thought it was being elevated.
I thought it was being elevated.
Is that another, is it being elevated?
No, it's a complete demolition.
Oh. So we're not elevating?
No. Well, we are elevating
No,
from
but
what's
it-
there now, but the house is not raised. It is a demolition. Hmm? Yes, new construction.
That's it.
In order to elevate an existing non-conforming home on the beach block of South Douglas, that's just,
Joe, Clarendon.
Roger was sick today.
Very.
Just clear the record.
It is not an elevation of an existing non-conforming home on South Douglas. It is a construction of a new home on South Clarendon.
That is all correct.
104 South Clarendon.
Correct.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So the only, excuse me. So the variances are the third floor deck, the front yard landscaping,
And height.
and the height.
Yeah, now in his comments, he mentioned something about a rear yard and minimum distance. Are those not,
I don't believe that's applicable, and I was going to address that, but that's,
okay.
thank you, Mr.
I agree.
Peters. Yeah.
I read all that for nothing.
Yeah, we're bringing that up. Yeah, I'll bring it. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicants. As Mr. Galantino read Mr. McCarnan's report, primarily what we've got here is the demolition entirely of the existing structure, which sits on about a 90-something% impervious cement block sidewalk, which extends through most of the property, and the construction of a fully flood-compliant new home, which does need several variances. The concept with this construction really relates to more flood protection and no detached garage. So when Terry Cummings testifies, really what we're talking about here is putting the parking underneath, which really forces the house to go up, so that we don't have the standard cookie cutter detached garage, which very few people use for parking. It ends up being storage or something else. And we're getting cars off of a fairly well-traveled street to get to the beach. There are only 3 homes on each side of the street on this block. So by putting the parking beneath, we've got off-street parking, that's a big addition. Plus, we don't have the additional detached garage, which, as everyone knows, kind of clogs up the light air and open space. So although this house does need a height variance, it's only based upon having more flood protection on the first level, which will be deed restricted. I know a lot of people, as Clem pointed out earlier, try to put a square peg in a round hole. The first level will come with a deed restriction that says no livable space, as Mr. Galantino requires, below the base flood elevation. So to the extent the board, I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson, you look like you were going to ask a question.
Well, it's not allowed anyway. I don't know why you need a deed restriction.
Well,
You're
the
you're
fact that it's not
you're allowed
allowed,
storage, parking, and access. That's the only things you can do under
correct.
in the house.
But as we know, the house gets built, it gets a CO, and then, what are you doing down there?
Right.
Transfer title.
Correct. So this will be deed restricted, that there will only be storage, and I think it's even shown on the plan, storage only. So we also need third floor deck, and with the understanding that your land use ordinance at some point will be changed in the future to allow third floor decks on beach blocks. This is proposed already. Third floor decks are very common on beach blocks, and as everyone can see from the rendering, as Ms. Cummings prepared and as prepared to be circulated around, got some pretty neat architectural aspects of the house. So having said that, I'd like to have Terry come up and testify as to what she's designed and the justification for the variances. Terry is a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey.
We accept our qualifications.
Thank you.
But before you start, I just want to make a comment. A lot of what Roger says in here, and we've been doing this for a year now, of this is the old rules, this is what the new rules are going to be. And we've allowed people to go, not a beach block, from 28 feet to 30 feet. But that's not the only rules. The rules are if they went to 30 feet, and again, this doesn't apply to the beach block, that the roof be at a higher pitch. And along with that, from the first floor to the second floor beam, you can correct me on this, Mike, if you want, the plate is allowed to be 20 feet, and you've got 26 feet here. So, we have every reason to say, okay, well, we'll let you go the extra 2 feet for the garage. That's the purpose of the new ordinance, but you have to meet those other requirements, and you're way over on, it's not a variance now, but if we're going to say we'll approve this because this is what's going to happen, it wouldn't pass what's going to happen because of that aspect, and it's way over. So I would like you to address that.
I can do that.
Okay.
And just state your name and address for the record, we'll get you sworn in.
Terry J. Cummings, 102 Arbor Court West in Linwood.
And you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, Terry, you've heard the board's comments, you've heard my little introduction there. We've discussed Roger's report, and we've talked to Roger a little bit ahead of time. So explain to the board what you're proposing, why you feel that the positives of this application outweigh any detriments, and walk us through the variances that are requested.
Okay. To start with, the existing house today, as you can see from the drawings and from the site plan, have almost no green space. It's all concrete. The house itself, while not bad looking on the outside, is very old, has been renovated many times, and some of the finished space is down at grade level. All of the house is below the floodplain, and the only patch of grass is a tiny little patch in the back. In addition, it is over the existing home now, is over the actual setback and property line by a couple of inches on one side and on the front setback as well, the front property line. So
I wasn't quite sure. Did he say the neighbor's property is actually on your property too?
no, I believe that's a mistake, but it is 2 inches off our
Oh,
property.
okay.
So we have a garage on the right-hand side that is only 2 inches off the property line, giving us a problem. We have a retaining wall at the back of the property line. This house is spread all over to every possible property line. So the decision to tear down the home and build a new one was what we decided to go with. Now, please, this is important. This house was designed originally as a new home that met every possible zoning envelope requirement. The setbacks worked, the lot coverage worked, the height worked at 30 feet, and there was a detached garage in the back corner. That was the initial design. But during the design phase, the floodplain lifted. And in this case, it lifted 2 feet for our particular property. So we went from a finished floor of 12 to a finished floor of 14. They gave us a crawl space that was approximately 6 feet high. And we still lost a lot of back space, and we needed to put the garage in the back right corner just inches away from the other existing garage, which is a difficult thing to build and a terrible thing to try to maintain and keep clean of debris. So knowing that we would only need to ask about 30 inches in order to get the house up, we could then get a car in the space below it, keep some additional parking. Only 3 cars are required. We are giving you 4 off-street parking spaces. The rest of the basement or crawl space level will remain unfinished. There is no plans to ever finish it, and the homeowner, Jamie, is going to use it for storage. She can put her furniture, her outdoor furniture, the surfboards that they have, the beach chairs, the garbage cans. They have plenty of space for that. This house is also universally designed. We have an elevator that will go all the way from grade level, or the garage level, first, second, and third floor, as well as the stairwells. The house itself is a 4-bedroom home. I'd be happy to walk you through the plan and show it if you would like me to take the time to do that. In fact, part of this home, the part of it was to take advantage of the ocean views that they have from this beautiful piece of land, which is all on the corner. That is the request for having the decks on the left front corner of the home where the beach view is, and be able to use it from each level, including the top floor plan. Now, I want to address the fact that you said we did not meet the eve requirements of the house. And that was because the house was completely and utterly designed before we raised it. And that was not a consideration. The whole house worked within the zoning envelope as was designed. The only intention to raise it happened when, in the middle of design, the floodplain got raised 2 feet. And we thought the easiest, simplest way to address this was to just ask for the 30 inches. The house is still a 30-foot from finished first floor to ridge height design, so
Let's make
nothing
that real
changed.
clear.
Yes.
The house itself does not go up additional living space. It's just the concrete, basically the concrete blocks are being increased.
Correct, only the grade
And that's the
floor level.
intention of the new master plan.
Right.
Except for
Except for what?
the wall, the side wall, 6 feet over what the new master plan is going to allow.
Had we started this design after the raise in the floodplain, I would have taken that into account when designing the space, but the house was already designed this way, and it met all your zoning requirements when I designed it, and told the change that we ask now to go up 30 inches taller from grade to be able to get the car underneath.
Are you saying, are we talking about eve height here?
No, the other plate.
Huh? Yeah, okay. So theoretically speaking, if there was a, like a little pent roof built or something like that, then that would be a
No,
remedy?
no, it's
Not-
top of plate.
Oh, top
You
of
can't
plate.
fake it with a pent roof, no.
Towards the top of plate, 20 feet,
Okay.
or 26.
And that was what we were trading for, letting the houses go higher. So it was an important trade.
I think if you see the design of the home, which you can see very well in the 3D color drawing, you'll see that it is an asset to the neighborhood. We think that it adds a lot of curb appeal and beauty, takes great advantage of the outdoor space, and what's particularly nice is it draws away from all its neighbors. We are now more than inside the required setbacks, a little bit extra. I always give a little extra space, and we have green space all the way around the house and away from the other neighbors, so they have a lot more light and air with this design that they could have otherwise. Particularly if we had to go back down to putting it down low again and putting a detached garage in the back, that actually would be detrimental to the neighbors, and we're trying to avoid that. And even in this space, it is not a large home. It is a, I don't know, square footage, what it is. What I have it on my drawing there. What's the square footage?
Total 2938.
2938. It is not a terribly large home, and some of the spaces inside are 2-story at the request of the homeowner, so that it appears in this front piece here. We actually have space that will remain 2 stories and have a loft effect within the house that looks over into the living room and out to the ocean views. So it is a very light, airy home.
And just, please, Terry, if you just don't mind pointing out, in the event you chose to make the house comply, the house above the concrete would remain exactly as it is, correct? It would just be
Exactly.
lower with less concrete block.
Correct. And that would meet all the zoning requirements as they laid out today.
Except for the third floor deck.
Yes.
Correct. So, very important understanding the plate height issue, that we've got the same exact house would just be 2.5 feet lower.
30 inches lower.
30 inches from what it is now. if we didn't want to put the garage underneath. So by putting the garage underneath, we get rid of the detached garage, and now we've got same house, just dropped on a different foundation, which is slightly higher, correct?
Correct.
So you're saying this was designed prior to the...
Correct. So the history is
Yes,
this. The house
correct.
is done. Terry went, and Roger would tell you, Terry went to talk to Roger and said, this is the house we want to build. He said, you're almost close enough to get a garage underneath, but it needs a variance. At that point, Michelle had to make a decision. Do I go in with a house that has a detached garage and a 4.5 foot high crawl space, or garage underneath and a 8 foot crawl space? And the idea was, she doesn't need the detached garage, she can put the storage underneath, but it does open up the lot so much more. And Terry, you can tell me I'm wrong, took the house and literally just raised it up 30 inches with 3 courses of concrete, and that was it. So, house remains exactly the same. If the variances weren't granted, it would be the exact same house, just slightly lower on a lower foundation with a detached garage.
Terry, what is the actual height of the crawl space, the garage?
It is 7.5 feet from grade to the bottom of the first floor. And that's enough to get the car in and an overhead 7-foot-high
But
garage.
it's not
door
8
open.
foot, which Eric just said.
No, I'm
No,
sorry, I
no,
missed
it's 7.5.
It's the minimum amount we could go, Mr.
get
Galantino
a
can confirm
car.
this, to get a car underneath with an overhead garage.
So, I didn't think that plate height applied to beach block properties,
Yeah, it does, but the 30 feet.
because it's always
it
been
all-
30 feet in the
I
beach
understand
block.
that. So the 30 feet, they could still have the 512 pitch roof,
Right.
okay? But the 20-foot applies everywhere. I've got it.
Terry, could you address what Mr. Patterson said? Because, and I think you referred to it as the change, but it's still a proposed change, and it appears as if we're plucking the benefits of that proposed change without the concessions. So can you
Although,
address that?
Just addressing that point legally, once it's proposed that the change is going to occur, that the zoning is moving in that direction, then the board is not bound but guided by the fact that that change will occur. So if there's a proposed piece of legislation that hasn't yet passed, although it's not a by right decision, it's evidence that the board will be granting it. Same thing with third floor decks. We've been
Exactly
talking about
my-
that for 3 years.
Right.
And it hasn't yet passed, but the board has been correctly bound by the guidance that if it's gonna happen, the applicants get the benefit of that.
But looking at the proposed change as a whole, how can you address that?
Well, I want to talk about my conversation with Roger. I'd be more comfortable if Roger was here, but he is not. But I will say, when the house was originally designed, before we decided to raise it up, I went in and I spoke to Roger, as I always do on every home. Here's what I would like to build. Am I running into any issues that I may have missed in the zoning code? And he reviewed it with me, felt it was fine. We talked about the third floor deck, because I said that's an issue. And Roger agreed that it's an issue, but I should not let that hold us back. It was a reasonable request for that third floor deck as he saw it.
The entire beach block is going to get third-floor decks with
That's
the
what
new
he
rules,
said.
so it's not.
I don't want to speak
it's-
out of turn, but that is
yes.
what he said. And then when we came back to Roger, when we found out that we needed to now raise this house 2 more feet, we went back to Roger, and I said, Roger, it would make a lot of sense to put the car underneath. Is this something that the board would consider as a reasonable request?
Yes.
And the answer was yes, it's a request.
I-
But nowhere in this was discussed that I would have to start from scratch and redesign an entire home to make this
I
work.
understand that, and I would like to take a brief intermission, break, whatever. I'm going to talk to Roger.
Terrific, good.
Okay. All right.
We're off the record?
Yeah. Ready? All right, we're back in session. I checked with Mr. McLaurin, and it does not apply in this zone. It's only the 28-foot zone, so you don't have to meet that requirement. You did the house perfectly.
Thank you for, and obviously, we're aware Mr. McLaurin is not well, so we appreciate the board taking the time to make those inquiries. But with that, we rest.
Anything else from the board? Any other questions? Huh? I didn't get a chance. Clem, do you have a question?
The answer is yes.
Is there anyone from the public
Oh,
that
yeah,
would?
no, I do have a question. Terry, the 570 square feet on the attic level, if you want to call it that. Did that include anything for the stairwell or that open space?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It does not, that is exempt.
That's fine.
Don't look at me all the time, Clem. Look at the rest of
You're
them.
the boss man. When you design the house, this one in particular has the main living area at the second level, bedrooms on the first floor. Fine. But if a house was designed that way, and the upper level was just a master suite, for instance, and a whole lot of space was open to the floor below, you could get a 3-story house that would meet our 2.5-story requirements.
With the open space.
No, I'm trying to, oh, are you saying the second floor is open up through the third
Yeah.
floor and it's not counted as living space?
That's correct.
All right,
That makes sense.
all right. See your point?
Okay. The only other thing, we're asking for 2.5 feet.
Correct.
Height. But you got a 9-foot ceiling in your middle level. You want the cake and you eat it too.
Well, I can answer that. We do have a 9-foot ceiling, but if you take a look at the floor plan, it is completely open, and you know, Clem,
I did look at the floor
that
plan.
the wider and larger the rooms are, the more important that the height is matched so that the rooms feel comfortable and the ceiling is too low. 9 foot for living space is absolutely the standard, and you will find 99% of all new homes built here in Margate will have a 9-foot ceiling on the open living space. In our case, it's dining room, kitchen, and living room.
But they're not asking for a 2.5 foot height variance.
We weren't either.
But the
This
cost of the
doesn't look very
2.5 foot is to put the garage underneath, which is the intent of the master plan.
We are still 30 feet from first
But you
floor.
don't need a
to finished
9-foot
space.
ceiling, which is part of the 2.5, a good part of it. And this second floor is not that open. I think you want,
Rich, is it 2 feet above the 30 that we're gonna allow?
2.5.
2.5.
2.5, okay.
It's, that's over FEMA, that's not over the first floor. It's still 30 feet over the first floor, but it's 32.5 over where the first floor should be.
And thank you, and that's something we want to, I'm going to ask Terry this question in a second, make perfectly clear. The house itself is 30 feet, finished first floor to roof ridge.
Right.
We're just raising up the beneath part of the house, crawl space, to allow the parking underneath. If the
Which
height
will be
variance-
allowed under the new
Correct.
master
And I
plan.
want to make a point of saying we are only raising it the minimum that we need to get the car in. If I
How,
had
how
to raise
much,
it a
how
foot,
much space do you have in the garage?
So Mr. Collins asked that before,
it's
it's 7.5.
Okay.
So with an
to the
overhead
ceiling.
garage, there couldn't be any tighter tolerance there. And I understand Clem's argument that, well, if you lowered a foot out of the house itself, you wouldn't need the same amount of the height variance, but we still want to have 30 feet finished first floor to roof ridge. We're just trying to pump it up to have more space underneath. As minimum of space as possible, being 7.5 for a garage, which, as everyone knows, is pretty tight.
I think the fact that.
We took out a space, a foot in the garage, and kind of took it from a portion of the second floor.
I think the fact that you're only 30 feet from the, the finished first floor to the top of the house, I don't, it's-
I
I don't see the problem.
Well, I do in a way. I understand now for the first time, Mr. Waslewski's point about the square footage on the third floor, and that's, to me, we need to look into that, but I think tonight's not the time to do it. But I think that's something the board needs to look into, because he said it to me before, but for some reason it clicked tonight, and I understand what he's saying.
But keep this in mind, Mr. Patterson, the second floor is not bigger than the first floor. The second floor here is 1140, the first floor is 1228.
I'm not objecting
Yeah,
to it.
okay.
I'm saying his point is well taken, and I think it's something the board needs to look into for the future.
Absolutely.
Because in appearance, you have a full third floor,
Understood.
which wasn't the intent. But that's the first time I've thought about it. I think it needs to be addressed and not here.
I can tell you that historically, that has been done multiple times. I have done it, I know of other designers who have done it, in order to meet the requirements of being sure we are not over that 50%, and the way the code is written, that is walkable floor space, occasionally, not, in this case, we could have made it, but you have areas where we're not allowed to build, and it's too difficult to roof it down for whatever structural reason or sometimes traffic pattern reason.
Well, if that's the way
by
if
opening
that's the
it.
way we end up doing it, you're gonna have to do that, but I'm not saying we need to change it, I'm saying it's something we need to look at. It's not gonna affect your case, but we're gonna be looking at that. I
And
just,
by way of a note, Clem's point is well taken. Everybody's trying to squeeze something in somewhere where it's a den that's got a closet that could be converted. You know, I said that at the earlier application. There's always a way someone's trying to get an additional 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag. This isn't one of those cases, but his point's well taken, that people try to do that all the time. So,
well, yeah, and again, it's not like we think you're gonna put a floor out there, but the intent was to bring down the massiveness of the houses with that 50% limit, and it doesn't do it in this case. So yes, we will be addressing it, but don't worry about it today.
we rest.
Anybody else? Questions? Anyone here from the public that would like to comment or question? Public portion is closed. If there's no further comment, would you read the motion, please?
Sure. And Eric, I'm just looking through Roger's report. It looks like in the comments section, a lot of those aren't applicable. So I'll just say you'll agree to comply with whatever's in his report to the extent it applies
That's
to this
correct.
application.
Understanding he's not well, if there's something he missed, I mean, we're not gonna say we got you, and we're gonna, you know, if there's something that comes back, but that's reasonable, of course, I mean, we're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we need a motion for C variance relief to permit the following: a third-floor deck where third-floor decks are not currently permitted, a front yard landscaping variance of 39.2%, where 60% is the required minimum and 50% is the required minimum when there's first floor steps to the first floor, and a building height variance of 32.5 feet, where 30 feet is the permitted maximum. And just as noted, that the applicant will comply with anything contained in Mr. McLaren's report to the extent it's applicable to this application.
I'll make a motion.
Mike?
Tom Collins?
A lot of talk, a lot of case for a small street. The mitigating factors to me are the size of the street. There's only 3 homes on the street. The fact that you are putting parking under the house is something I've advocated for a long, long time. You're giving us more light, open air, and space by not putting a garage in. You're making it a beautiful home on a street, on a home that probably 30 years ago was beautiful, but today it's not. And I think what you're doing, your designs, your concepts, your conception of what we're doing with our master plan is spot on. I think this is really going to be a good project. I vote for it, and I wish you a lot of luck.
Clem Wozleski?
Well, as you heard me say, my problem is the height and the fact that they're asking for a foot more than they need. They want us to give, but they don't want to give anything back. So I vote no.
Bridge Patterson?
I agree with the applicant that if we do not approve this and they lower the house to 2.5 feet, they still have the same exact house with a large area underneath that could be used as a garage if they had raised it. Then you have the garage in the yard. I apologize for bringing up the issue of the 20 feet, but I'm glad I corrected myself and found out that it doesn't apply. So with that in mind, I think the house meets the intent of the old and the new master plan, and I approve the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
As with Mr. Patterson, I do agree with that the parking underneath is what we're trying to get to do. I don't like the height of it, but I don't see any way around it. And I have a hard time with Clem with the 9 foot on the air light on that whole thing. As far as the 3rd floor deck, I agree with my next door neighbor here for firemen. to try to get a 200-pound man out a window. I think the deck should be approved. So I vote yes.
Jim Galantino?
I'm glad we didn't elevate the structure as initially thought. But I think our chairman made a good point about all the potential changes that are coming to the new master plan. And I do like parking underneath the house. It gets rid of the garage. It makes a problem with on the rear and the side yard setback with drainage and everything. So I see that there's a lot of positives, and I approve the application.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I agree that the positives do outweigh the negatives. It is the intent of the plan to put garages under the house, which is what we've done here. And it is 30 foot from the first floor to the roof ridge. You know, I have concerns because we go from 28 to 30 and now it's 32 and what's next?
This was always 30.
Right, but I agree with Mr. Collins in that this is a short, there are basically two houses that front on the street versus a larger beach block. I will vote in favor of the application.
Thank you.
Mike Richmond?
I think that adding the extra parking is actually a benefit to the neighborhood. There is more air and open light, and I think it's a nice design on the roof.
Application passes 6-0.
Next case,
That's
Or 6-1.
6-1. And also, just want,
did
although he's
Mr.
not here.
Palmisano vote? Oh.
Although he's not here, I just wanted to, I wanted to be on the record to thank Mr. McLaurin because he was pretty proactive about getting the parking underneath. That was a big deal for him, especially on the beach block. So just wanted to be on the record that Ms. Cummings worked with him very closely and it worked out all well. So thank you.
Yes. Next case is Gary and Andrea Schwartz, 8302 Atlantic Avenue, Block 10.01, Lot 5, in the S40 District to grant a C variance relief for 2 side yard setbacks, combined side yard setback, building coverage, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. Galantino?
Background, the applicant is seeking a relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to construct 2 additions to existing 1.5-story single-family dwelling requiring variances. One addition is for the attached garage and second floor above, and the other is for the second floor addition. It is presumed that the pool and patio is proposed as well. The current proposed use is a single-family dwelling. Variance is required. Side yard setback, whereas the required minimum setback is 10 feet, 3.9 exists, 3.9 feet is proposed. Expansion of a nonconforming setback. 2, combined side yard setback, whereas the required combined setback is 22 feet, 15.9 feet exists, and 15.9 feet is proposed. Expansion of nonconforming setback. Building coverage, whereas 30% coverage is the maximum permitted, 27% exists, 32% is proposed. Waivers requested. A waiver has been requested and granted for providing a copy of an area map. Waiver has been requested to provide a survey less than a year old. Comments. The side yard setback variances are required to the expansion of nonconforming setbacks, i.e. the roof. The combined side yard setback is due to the expansion of the nonconforming setback. Total for the applicant. 3, landscaping coverage is still meeting the required minimum. 4, building coverage will exceed the maximum permitted requiring a variance. 5, both C1, C2 criteria need to be satisfied in this application. 6, positive and negative criteria will need to be satisfied. 7, the plans do not clearly show what is proposed on site. Is a pool proposed? Is a patio proposed? 8, the proposed front porch replaces an existing porch. 9, the source of the average setbacks is required to be submitted. 10, AC units are to be screened with lattice or vegetation. 11, the proposed improvements are subject to the substantial improvement requirement of the city's ordinance. If anybody has a question about that substantial improvement, ask me if you're not clear on that. The existing FF is finished first floor is approximately elevation 8.3 converted to the 1988 datum, which is 5.7 below the required first floor elevation. If nobody's understanding that, let me know. That's it.
Well, in that vein, and you've looked at this, and it meets the requirements that the addition won't be more than 50% of the building?
50% of the assessed or appraised value of the structure.
Right.
Right.
And it
Yes.
meets that requirement?
Yes.
Okay. So in a case like this won't affect our flood
No.
ratings?
What we do normally is we give them a form, and we have it signed by the contractor and the owner that verifies that they won't improve the value, improve any further than the 50% of the assessed or appraised value.
But
So
you look at that and you saw it was reasonable?
we do, but if they do start the job and then they go into another aspect of it, like let's say they rip the whole thing apart and now
Right.
they're totally got the whole thing, then we tell them, now you've exceeded the 50%. Now you have to elevate the
Okay.
structure.
I knew that, I just wanted you to clarify it. Are you done?
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Peacock on behalf of the applicants, Andrea and Gary Schwartz. As you heard from Mr. Galantino this evening, this is an application for a second floor addition to the existing 1.5-story home. One of the additions in the second floor is for a new master suite. The other addition is taking the detached garage, demolishing that, and putting an attached garage with 1 bedroom above it. We require side yard setback variance relief because we have existing non-conforming setbacks. We are not building into those setbacks so that there will be any development that is closer to either home on either side of the property, but we are going up. We are changing the roof pitch so that this is a full 2-story home with a pitched roof, and that requires the side yard setback variance relief. We also require building coverage relief of 2% over the required 30%. Due to the fact that we are attaching the garage now with a bedroom above it, even though the attached garage is slightly smaller than the detached garage that already exists on the property. As part of the application, there is a new in-ground pool that's proposed. That doesn't implicate any variance relief here, and actually the pool equipment will be located within the garage so that there won't be any adverse impacts from the pool or the equipment associated with that.
Can I interrupt you for a
Sure,
second? Is the old garage coming down?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's the new garage. Okay.
So with me this evening is Mr. Peter Weiss, the architect of record who designed the plan. As you can see from the architecture, this will be a nice freshening up and modernization of the existing home. It has that because it's a 1.5-story home, it has more of a dated look with a slanted roof, and we think this provides better building symmetry and will be a nice aesthetic enhancement to the neighborhood.
All right, I want to restate something you said to make sure I have it.
Absolutely.
They're taking down a garage, they're adding a garage to the house, which is smaller than the existing garage,
Correct.
and that's the reason the coverage is going over the maximum land coverage, because it's now counted as coverage instead of the garage.
That's correct.
Okay, I just
Yep.
wanted to be clear on that.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. I'll Mr. Weiss go through the proposed plan, and if there are any questions thereafter, feel free to pose them. Mr. Weiss?
Mr. Weiss, just real quick, just state your name and address, so I'll swear you in again.
Peter Weiss, 101 North Washington Avenue, Margate.
And you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, I know we summarized the plan, but briefly...
You're going to have to share the mic, we can hardly hear you, so just
briefly
take
walk
turns.
the board through the proposed additions here.
Okay, so I'm sure you've all seen this house because it's on Atlantic Avenue and it stretches along the street pretty far. Existing house is a split level. It's 2 stories on the right side, 1 story on the left side. The first floor is currently the living space on the left side. On the right side is a bedroom and a den and a laundry area. And then there's 3 bedrooms on the right side, which form the second floor on the right side. As you know, as you've seen, I'm sure, the existing roof pitch is very low. It's less than a 212. So it presents a lot of problems because it's really too flat for a shingled roof, and it's too steep for a flat roof, membrane type roof. So, and right now there's currently shingles on it. It was originally designed with a slag roof, which was sort of a tar roof with stones on it. But because the pitch is so low, we've had a lot of roof leaks over the years. So that was one of the inspirations for, doing some work on the house, was to alleviate the roof leaks. So what we propose to do is demolish the existing garage that's in the rear detached. There's a little alley behind the house, which serves as access currently to the existing two-car garage. So what we want to do is demolish the garage, which will open up the alley space, attach it to the building. It'll now become a 300 square foot garage, whereas before it was 400 square feet. That'll allow us, of course, to get from the garage into the house directly, and open up the backyard space. We also proposed to add a master bedroom over the one-story portion on the left side, so there'll be, you know, half a set of steps to get up there. The building additions don't require any setback relief. The only relief we're looking for is the coverage, building coverage, because of attaching the garage. You know, a detached garage doesn't count as building coverage, but an attached garage does, so that's going to put us 2% over what's permitted. Then the side yard variances really have to do with just making the roof steeper. Because the house encroaches into the side yards, just by virtue of the fact that we're raising the roof to a higher pitch, adds some volume in the setback, so that triggers the variances for the side yard setback. Even though we're not increasing the square footage, we're adding volume in the side yards.
So I just want to reiterate that point, Mr. Weiss, is that we're not building any further into the setback, so both on the left side of the home and the right side of the home, the distance to the property line remains the same.
Correct.
Oh.
I have no further questions.
Any other questions from the board? Anyone from the public here to comment, question? You have a question? Well, turn your mic on.
Pete, the one parking place next to the garage, 10 foot 2. It's really tight. You narrow up the garage a bit, give them a little more room.
The ordinance only requires 9 feet. I mean, 10 feet is a little bit.
Well, I know 9 by 18, but that's fine in a public parking garage. Doesn't work in a situation like that. And the only other thing, the pool doesn't, if in fact the arborvitae's get planted like that, we don't have the 3-foot clearance around the pool.
Well, you can clarify that to me, I guess. Does that include landscaping then? You can't have landscaping with
You
it?
have to have a 3-foot clear walkway around the entire pool under our ordinance. Right, 3 foot, Rich?
Yeah.
What?
6 foot.
3 foot.
No, 6 foot from the property line, 3 foot clearance around the pool.
Right, so from a side property line, it would still be 6 foot.
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't meet that.
So you got plenty of room, just move the pool.
It's 13 and 6 on
3
here.
foot.
6'2", but then he put all plantings and he blocks the walkway.
Yeah, basically existing.
Oh,
Odds are, you know, some of them,
oh, yeah, just get rid of that.
some of them would probably end up being removed just in the process of putting the pool in. So either shrink the pool, move the pool, or get rid of the shrubs.
Move the pool.
Whatever.
That's all I have.
Just like that forest. No further questions? Let's go.
Did we do public comment?
No.
That's it, done.
Oh, but we interrupted it. Let's start again. Anybody from the public here to comment? Please come forward, state your name, and then be sworn in. State your name and address, and then be sworn in.
Tim Winfelder, 8306 Atlantic Avenue. I'm Gary's neighbor.
Mr. Winfelder, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that Gary keeps a lovely property now, and I'm sure this will be a lovely property too. Only one question, and I talked to Gary about it. There's flashing off the garage now that is attached to my garage. And he said that he would take care of it as far as repairing my roof when he takes the garage down.
I'll make sure it gets done.
Pardon?
I'll make sure it gets done.
Thank you. That's all I have to say, but
No problem.
Gary will do a good job.
I appreciate it for coming in.
Anyone else? Mr. Linsky, have anything to say? Okay. Public portion is closed. Is there any other questions from the board? If not, would you read the motion, please?
Sure. And Mike, you're okay with everything in Mr. McLaurin's report? And you can provide that 3 feet of clearance around the pool You under,
Yes, we will.
okay, so we need a motion for C variance relief for the following: side yard setback of 3.9 feet, where 10 feet is required, combined side yard setback of 15.9 feet, where 22 feet is required, building coverage variance of 32%, where 30% is the permitted maximum. They're showing a couple waivers on this, the report. Are you requesting those?
Yes, we are.
Okay, a waiver from providing an area map of all properties within 200 feet, and a waiver providing for a survey that's more than a year old, and you can represent that the survey's accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And the conditions will be, the applicant will make sure there's a 3 feet around the pool, and will comply with all the representations it made and all other conditions contained in Mr. McLaren's report of July 26, 2018.
I'll make a motion.
Jim? Mike?
Tom Collins?
This is a pretty simple case. I think it's very de minimis. I think you're actually improving the neighborhood by taking the garage out and providing more open air in the back, closer to the street and where the neighbors are than inside the property. I really don't see anything wrong. I think it'll be a nice improvement to the house, and if Tim says you keep your house nice, I believe it, so I vote for it.
Clem Wasilewski?
The relief that they're asking for here is pretty minor, and I think it's more than offset by the improvement to this property. So I vote in favor.
Rich Patterson?
I agree with Mr. Collins and Mr. Wesleski. I approve the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
I'm in agreement with the other board members. I think it's going to be a definite improvement. Show me a flat roof, I'll show you a leak. So I think you win by that one. Good luck with the project.
Jim Galantino?
Hey, if you can get Mr. Winfeller out to say an approval, I appreciate that. He's been in this town a long time. The positives outweigh the negatives in this variance application. I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I agree, the positives outweigh the negatives in this case. The variances are, the attached garage creates the variance for the garage, which is actually smaller, and the roof line as well, the side yards, the distance between the houses is still the same. It's a vast improvement to what is there, and I will tell you, although I don't really want to, but I played in that house, and it kind of looks the same as it did 50 years ago. So this is a vast improvement, and I approve the application.
And Mike Richmond?
I agree with all the other board members, so I approve the application.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you. And again, just for the record, similar to the Goldstein application we heard this evening, the Schwartzes want to get started relatively quickly, so at their own risk, they may begin pulling the permits before the resolution's actually adopted. Just want to put that on the record.
You still have to see Roger McLaren to get the...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Next case is Daniel and Susan Davis, 90, please sit down, Mrs. Gubernati. Ms. Next case, Daniel and Susan Davis, 9005 Ventnor Avenue, Block 223, Lot 15, in the S60 District to grant C variance relief for principal building setbacks, deck height, deck setbacks for side and rear yard, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. Galantino?
The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate to complete a non-compliant raised rear patio that encroaches into the setbacks. The variants are as discussed below. The applicant submitted plans for zoning approval and were approved by the zoning construction with some minor comments. The applicant's architect then requested a base flood elevation BFE design committee hearing to adjust the FF finished first floor, upwards which the ordinance permitted. I think we granted them a foot. The plans were submitted with the adjusted finished first floor elevation. The plans did not clearly indicate that the rear patio was to be elevated. The survey information provided indicated that the existing topographic conditions were in 88 datum. However, as we have learned, they were in a 1928 datum, thereby making the existing grades 1.3 feet lower than shown. Now, just be clear, the 29 datum was the old datum that we used for years, and then the 88 changed after Sandy. I just added that comment in there. The proposed grades refer to the 88 datum, which is accurate. The plans allowed for the slightly elevated and flattened rear patio with the in-ground pool. However, due to the datum error, the patio now sits 36 inches above the existing grade, which now requires a variance for setbacks. This discrepancy was noticed during the windshield inspection, and the construction official its contractor is notified immediately. But that's what that said. The property is a corner lot and sits within the parkway. The property has 2 front yards and 2 side yards, somewhat creating a hardship variance, but also creates an advantage. There are 2 adjacent properties that are directly affected by the situation. One would be less impacted than the other. Because the property is a corner property, the location of the garage is not subject to the same setback requirements as the neighbor along Vendome Avenue. There's essentially 40 feet of shared property line with the garage walls and the raised pool deck in between adjacent to a driveway. The side yard facing Longport has common line with the existing rear yard of the house only 3 feet from the property line. The required yard is 2.6 feet. The required side yard, 12.6 feet. The required side yard for the property is in question is 10 feet, which complies for the dwelling, but not for the raised patio. All right, so where do we go?
Variances.
Variances. Okay. Decks and patios over 18 inches from grade, Ventnor Avenue side yard, whereas 10 feet is the required minimum setback for this location per side, and 0 feet is proposed. 2. The decks and patios over 18 inches from the grade, Vendome Avenue side, whereas 10 feet is the required minimum setback for the location per side, and 0 feet is proposed. Comments. 1. The deck is much higher due to datum error. 2. The cover sheet of the drawing reviewed indicate existing pool elevations of 9 and 88 datum. Number 3, the elevations do not indicate much of the raised porch. The existing grade sloped upwards towards the rear. 4, the height of the pool fence will be an issue. 5, shrubs and vegetation may reduce the appearance of the error. 6, the majority of property is now above the base flood, which is not a good thing.
Bad thing.
A bad thing. I need my glasses. 7, the runoff from the patio needs to be addressed so that there's no runoff goes onto the neighboring property. 8, the applicant should indicate that no easements have been encroached upon. 9, the applicant shall be prepared to discuss the fence and what is proposed. Take it away, Eric.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Eric Olsen on behalf of the applicants, Mr. Daniel and Mrs. Susan Davis. So by way of background, what we have here is a little bit of a problem. Mr. Davis and Mrs. Davis bought a lot over a year ago and had a house designed by Mr. Zacher, who's here, which Davises would have liked to have been as low to the ground as possible. The idea here was, respectfully, talk about this, are getting up in years a little bit and didn't want to have so many steps to get up to their house, so many steps to necessarily enjoy the in and out of their property, which, as you know, is on a great lot on the Parkway on the corner of Ventnor and Vendome Avenues. So initially, Mr. and Mrs. Davis and Mr. Zacher met with Mr. McLarnon to talk about whether there'd be any relief from keeping the house as high as it needed to be and maybe lowering it down. Clearly, that's not something the board or the city was interested in, as our the CRS rating is based upon having the homes up out of harm's way. So, not really wanting to be at that height, as Mr. and Mrs. Davis have another house they own currently on Nassau, they said, fine, we can have the house up to a certain level, but we're going to try to keep it, the mass down as much as possible. That really wasn't possible, and the mass was, unfortunately, as Mr. Davis will testify, greater than he would have liked, and there were certain architectural changes that were made to the property. In addition to the mass of the front of the house, at an earlier date, there was a change to the garage being moved forward 2 feet. Around that same time, there was also a recertified survey and plan that Mr. Zacher sent in, which used the wrong survey datum, not the 29, the 29, not the 88. So what we ended up getting is a transom shot on a wall as to what level the pool and patio could be built up to. Mr. Almeida, who's the builder from Bayfront, cut the property directly on, and actually a little bit below, the height that would have been allowed. Unfortunately, that transom shot and the construction of the patio was based upon incorrect data. So, computer theory, garbage in, garbage out. You got bad information on the way in, unfortunately, due to a bad survey. Mr. Zacher relies upon that bad info innocently, submits plans to Mr. McLarnon, who signed off on the plans, but then in the field, what was built is not in line with Margate zoning ordinance. So we're here to ask for a variance from what is currently built, and there's a current red flag on the property that doesn't allow the construction of the pool deck and the patio, and we would like that to be lifted once and if the variance is granted to allow the completion of the project basically as it stands now, and there will be pavers put on the deck and ultimately the pool be filled with water. Having said that, prior to getting to our professionals, Mr. Davis, who has been quite distraught about this entire incident, as he's not an architect and he's not a builder. He's a guy that bought a piece of land and has a house built for him, which is not what he expected, but now that it's built, it's what he anticipates owning and using. So, Dan, if you don't mind stepping
Can I
up,
ask a
Mr.
question
Net.
real quick?
Yes.
What is the finished floor elevation of the house?
Of the house itself?
Yes.
Not the patio and pool
No,
deck?
the house.
12,
So, and that's an 88?
correct.
Okay.
Well, there's no question, the only variances is the pool deck, right?
Correct.
There's no, the house is
complies.
all
Correct.
compliant.
That's right.
Swear, Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Davis, state your name and address for the record. I'll swear you in.
Daniel Davis, 2 South Nassau Avenue, Margate.
And do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dan, you've obviously been involved in getting to this point for quite some time. You've paid close attention to all the building codes, and you know more probably about base floods and concrete patios than you need to know. And I know you've got some remarks prepared for the board, so take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. My wife and I have been longtime residents of Margate since 1989. We love living in this community, and it was our goal to retire here. It still remains our goal. We contracted in May of last year with Bayfront Properties to build what was to be our dream house and our retirement home. Unfortunately, this has turned out to be something less than a dream house, given everything that's transpired. When we learned that instead of having 3 or 4 steps to our front landing, and that we would have 9, we were extremely upset and ultimately came to grips with the fact that we were either going to walk from the deal and find some way of selling the property or persevere. And we decided to persevere because we loved what was being designed. I'm sure you've seen the home and you know it's a classic Parkway home and designed to be very, very nice in that regard. So we did persevere. We made a major concession, which was giving up the entire front porch. When we learned that the house was going to be as high, or how we learned that the house was going to be as high as it was when we saw the front foundation built. That was the first we saw it. We thought, as I said, it was going to be 3 or 4 steps to the front door. Well, there was this.
Had you seen elevation drawings before that?
We did, and the elevation drawings that we saw showed 3 or 4 steps. And that was the problem. So we had this massive wall in the front of the house, and it was close to the sidewalk, and we didn't like the way it looked. So we took down the entire porch and made just a front step entrance leading to a portico to the front door. So we gave up all of our seating on the front of the house. That made the back of the house even that much more important. When our children are down, we have 2 kids married with 2 kids each, so there's 10 of us. So we have no front seating in the front, and the back became the focal point of where we would be living and enjoying our lifestyle at the shore.
Dan, just gonna stop you real quickly there, because it's important. Obviously, the height of the front of the house has to carry around to the back of the house. So once you were up that high, you knew that those steps would have to carry around somehow to the back, correct?
Yeah, but we were told by the builder that the step down would not be quite as severe, that we would be able to to build basically what we have. And so now to learn that the height of that wall is a problem is beyond distressing for us, because that is the living space that we need.
Because it was always your intention, since you gave up the front, to make the back the place where you were going to spend all of your time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where we will be living. We have a pool, and we did that, for our family to be together and be able to have enough room around the pool. So if that wall has to come down on one side, it just renders it non-usable from my perspective. It'll take away seating space and just usability. Moreover, I think while I'm very sensitive to the issue about our neighbors and the impact that it has on them, the feeling we have is that we can design something that will be aesthetically extremely beautiful. I mean, the entire house was done without skipping a beat. We invested an awful lot in it, and it looks beautiful, and we're not going to cheap out now. So the back would be designed very nicely as well. We envision whether it's the reality is if it's an 18-inch high wall and a fence above that, or a higher wall and a lower fence, you still get to the same issue. There's going to be a high perimeter around the house, because there's a pool there.
So you say high perimeter, what you're saying is, one way or another, there will be a 6-foot-high something, whether it's 3 feet of concrete and 3 feet of fence, or 6 feet of fence, there will always be the same impact on your neighbors based upon the pool needing a fence to go around.
Well, but the pool needs a 5 to 6 foot fence, so you're talking 8 to 9 feet.
Well,
You can't put a smaller fence.
the patio, we discussed with Mr. McLaren, could have what we refer
this
to
is
as
3
a
foot.
rail and not a fence. If it's a rail,
3-foot fence around
which
the
is
pool.
around the patio, which is required on a patio, it could be 4 feet high.
I think,
Huh?
Right, 4 feet, has to be 4 feet.
Ground level. Inside ground level.
Right.
No.
I need this on the
One-
record,
one at a time.
please.
I'm sorry.
No.
No, I know.
Mike, I need it on the record, please.
I think the issue might be, besides I understand that 4 feet could be technically permitted with the pool, but I think the issue will then become not only the safety of the pool being on the one side, but the privacy of the neighbors on the other side, because if you have that low fence, at the minimum 4 feet allowed, you're technically going to be looking down on people.
We have-
That would be my concern, with a
we-
4-foot
We have a
minimum.
design idea to address that. And the design idea, I don't know if we have the pictures to show, or
Yeah,
where are
no,
they?
the board has the picture.
Okay, so the idea was on top of the rail, we would put flower boxes, and coming out of the flower boxes would be something like grass that you see on the beaches, something to create, a privacy, because we want the privacy for our sake as well as our neighbors. So
I don't see that. Where is that, Eric?
There is no page.
Because it's raised, that grade.
He said there's a picture that we can see. That just shows.
No, there's another one.
There's new renderings that we prepared. Mr. Collins, if you don't mind, I can pass some of these around, and I'll give you a bunch, and I'll take a bunch down.
Is that just one rendering?
It is, we can call this applicant's exhibit 1, Mr. Manos.
A1 colored rendering.
Oh, you mean on top?
Yeah, on top.
Now, are you proposing 6 foot only on that one side, or all around, or what are you proposing?
Two sides. The 2 sides that
The
face
two-
neighbors.
So what is the height gonna be from the grade level to the top of whatever this thing is?
Well, when you say the top, Mr. Richmond, do you mean the top of the grasses, or to the top of the planter on the,
Well, the top of the planter.
well, it'll be 6 feet to the underside of the planter, which is less than a foot high, and then the grasses would grow
Right.
So it's a 3-foot fence, not a 4-foot fence, a 3-foot fence.
Well, ideally, it would be a 4-foot fence.
What are you proposing? This is a 3-foot fence? On top of the block wall?
That is a 4-foot fence with the grasses on top.
On top of a 4-foot block wall with two.
So a 3-foot fence and
You're
a...
gonna be like 10 feet above that.
It's a 3-foot block
The
wall.
block wall is 36.
Wait a minute, one at a time.
Not
So is it 3 feet of concrete, 3 feet of fence, and then a planter on top?
So,
Or is it 4-foot fence?
4-foot of fence. which
And a
is-
planter on top?
Correct. Now, the
saying
fence
that's only 3
in your ordinance is a rail. It matters because a pool has to have a fence around it. A deck needs a rail. The rail can be 4 feet high per code. So what we've got is 36-inch high patio or deck with a 4-foot high rail with the grasses on top of it.
So then you have a 5-foot fence inside that around the pool?
Correct. Like a mesh with regard to the safety aspect of it,
Wait a minute. Inside this, you're going to have another fence around the pool?
if you need it, no.
That doesn't sound feasible.
Well, it can be done. We're not proposing that, but for safety purposes.
Well, I'm not asking you to. It
Okay.
sounds ridiculous to me that you would do that. That would take over your patio. That doesn't make any
It would
sense.
defeat the purpose. We need enough area to be able to sit.
Exactly. So my question again is, you have a 3-foot wall, a 3-foot fence, and a 1-foot planter. Is that correct?
No,
So a 3-foot wall, 4-foot fence, and a planter.
correct.
So you have 8 feet.
Approximately, depending on how high the grass is.
Right, well, Mr. Richmond asked the question, and it was 6 feet. So what you have is actually 8 feet here from the outside.
We would, if I could, we would make it whatever it needs to be compliant.
It only needs to
acceptable
be
you.
6 feet, because it goes from the outside. In other words, the fence is so kids can't get in or whatever. So you have a 3 feet wall, and you have to have a 3-foot railing per code for decks, right, Jimmy?
Well, yeah,
Right, correct?
right.
So 6 feet would be fine. 3 foot and 3 foot. You
No,
don't
he's
need
got-
the planter
no,
on
8
top,
feet.
you don't need the 4 foot, you don't need 4 foot, you only need 3 feet, because Jim, as far as I know, the height of the fence is judged from the outside of the property, not the inside.
The
Correct?
fence is judged, Rich, I'm pretty sure, on both sides, so that
I don't
nobody can
think
get
so.
in. Yeah, you don't want anybody falling over, because if somebody on the 3-foot side
If it's a 3
fell
foot,
over.
One at a time, one at a time.
if it's a 3 foot, a porch or a deck is only required to have a 3-foot railing. So you have 3 foot for the railing. Theoretically, we only need 5 feet, so theoretically, it could only be 2 feet, but that doesn't work because it's a deck, so it's gotta be 3 feet. So if you had a 3-foot wall and a 3-foot fence, then that's all you need. You don't need the planter on top, you don't need the 4-foot fence, now, I'm gonna rely on Mr. Galantino to clarify that, but that's pretty.
Well, Mr. Richmond, I think you're correct. I think the applicant was trying to do whatever he could do to soften that look, so.
Well, it's not softening it by building it, by having it 8 feet out of the ground. You know what
I
I'm
agree,
saying? It's-
but it would be a
it's
little softer
softening
with
it
some
by
grass.
keeping it at 6 feet.
That's,
Or I mean, that's just my opinion.
sure.
And Jimmy, question for you, in this one picture, they're showing 5 courses of block, unfinished.
Isn't that
So
40
that's-
inches?
That's 40 inches.
Right,
Not 3 feet.
right.
And then they're gonna put a pavers or a block on top of it. So you're gonna be pretty close to
42
4
inches,
feet on
yeah.
that before you do anything.
Well, they're
You
showing,
can count them, it's right in the picture.
I measured it, it was 40 inches.
And then you've got all your finishes above that. And then,
Mine's bigger than yours.
So if it's 40, it doesn't matter. So then that means that if it's 40 inches and then you got the paver on top, so it's gonna be like 44 inches, and then you have to have 3 foot on top of that because you have to have that fence. So now it's definitely gonna be higher than 6 feet. It's gonna be more like 6'6", correct?
You're right, the ground came up. The ground came up,
Yes.
right.
3-foot block on the other side of the neighbor's house.
Mike, how does that address the issue, though, of basically the homeowners looking down on the neighbors?
Huh? Well, if you had a deck.
Because you're gonna have this raised grade, and say you bring it down to your 3,
Right.
or even whatever you're saying, you're looking down onto your
Well,
neighbors.
are the neighbors here to testify?
Well, I don't know, but if this is built as we're discussing it, that's going to happen. And I don't think Tom got to finish his thought. He's saying, what about the safety of the homeowners and the children and the guests? If they only have 3 feet, what of their safety about
3
falling
feet is
over?
3 feet is cut.
It's not code for a swimming pool, Mike, and if you go to a second floor deck, they make you go to 42 inches,
That's
right?
commercial.
Commercial.
Third floor.
But it's like a commercial area if you have a swimming pool.
No, we can't, I agree with you up to that point. Yeah. All right, moving on from that particular issue.
With regard to
You
Mr.
still have a 3-foot wall there, right?
Follow up Mr. Richmond's question. There will be a 6-foot-high wall, whether it's 4 feet of block and and 2 feet of fence, or 6 feet of fence. There will be a combination that creates a 6-foot-high wall, as Mr. Davis was saying, one way or another. Now, the test position, at some point, if you are standing on the deck and you look out, and you're as tall as Mr. Davis, you will be above the fence line, which is why he proposed softening it up. Even though it looks bigger from the street, Mr. Richmond, and from the yard, you won't necessarily have to see a person, and the person won't have to see you if there's some sort of planting or grass on the fence or in and around the fence area, so that it's a little bit more decorative, and also the grasses will grow. And, I guess they could plant arborvitaes and have them be 10 feet high, and that would be a wall that, nobody would want to see.
Would you be making these arguments if you were coming in before the house was built, that they should be able to raise up the patio?
I think so.
Okay.
But unfortunately, now that it is built, we don't have a choice. So I know, Mr. Patterson, to your point, coming in beforehand to say we want something, obviously it's more reasonable, but it's built now, and we're going to get testimony as to the unfortunate series of events that caused it to be built. So we're trying to make the best of a kind of a sideways situation. I won't say it's a bad situation, because I think it's very aesthetically pleasing, but certainly it's sideways because it's not per code. It's a great design. It's a well-built house by Mr. Almeida, but it's not zoning compliant. All right, so I'm sorry. We did interrupt Mr. Davis, and I know he has
I think
more to say about being a responsible homeowner and citizen on this block to try to please his neighbors and to please the city and to comply with the overall zone code of the city of Margate and the MLUL. So I cut you off,
Yeah,
Dan.
no, that's okay. I really don't have much more to say. I mean, we're kind of trapped in a situation that was not of our making. And at this point, we're looking for a resolution that can be acceptable to all concerned and aesthetically pleasing. And we set out to build a really beautiful home, and we did. And we want to finish it up the same way. And we want to have our neighbors be happy with the outcome as well. We think some are. We're not sure about others, but they're here to maybe speak for themselves. But that's really all we have to say. I mean, we're beyond distressed to be in this situation at this point in time. This was not what we set out to do. This was a very involved, expensive, and in more ways than one, emotionally draining situation for us. And to wind up now, we were supposed to have moved in on May 22nd, and that's approximately when the stop order came out. So we lost our ability to even sell our current home during this peak season. We just have no idea at this point what we'll wind up doing should this not go in the direction we hope it does.
And Mr. Davis, that's very important to discuss the hardship that you're experiencing now, because as the property owner, you've done everything you're supposed to do. You closed on the land, you designed a house, you went to the city, we went a process of moving the garage. You've basically followed all the rules. And by following the rules, you had your property inspected, turned out that something was built by way of an error, and that unfortunately, that error is forced upon you and your wife. You're not
No, as
in
I
any,
said-
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say this, we're kind of the victim in this and kind of caught between the rock and the hard place. We didn't set any of the heights, we didn't develop any of the plans. We're just Joe consumers, this was the house we wanted. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out quite the way it was planned. So
And
that's where we are.
you've not, and this is important for the board to hear as well, you've not directed anyone to build this wall where it is and how high it is, correct?
No, correct.
Right. You're not a builder, that's not your trade?
Nope, I don't think so.
You're just a guy who happens to be in a strange situation.
Yep.
Just one more question. When you saw the drawings of the front elevation, there was 3 or 4 steps, and then when it was built, there was, how many steps?
9.
9 steps. And then you were led to believe that the front needed 9 steps, but the back needed 3 steps or 4
No,
steps.
what we were told is that the back would be tiered down to what it is now.
That just, it just makes no sense to me. You need 9 steps access in the front and 3 or 4 in the back, and that would meet requirements. Just doesn't make sense to me. And look, you're a consumer. You're not a builder. You're not an architect. You're not a surveyor.
This is what I was told.
But they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Mr. Davis was told, we're gonna.
I understand. He was told that by the professionals that he had. I don't fault you at all for following what your professionals told you.
Mrs. Davis is also here in the front row. She can testify to about the same if the board wants to hear testimony from her.
It's up
I'm
to
not
her.
sure it'll do any, she'll say anything different, but Susan, if you would like to speak, you can just. Okay,
All right,
yes.
is it correct to say that all this problem stems from the surveyor's error?
Yes. Couldn't have said it better. That datum was misidentified on a plan that carried through from bad survey, relied upon by the architect, submitted to Mr. McLarnin, signed off by Mr. McLarnin, built in the field by Mr. Almeida, observed by Mr. Davis. Everybody thought it was fine. The project gets far enough along for inspections, and then we look at this and say, how did it happen? That's how it happened.
I have a question. Rich, so, I'm new to the board, and I'm sure a lot of this took place before.
I can't hear you. Can you talk to me?
I say I'm new to the board, and I'm sure a lot of this took place before I got here, but I'm understanding that the wrong datum was used by the surveyor?
Correct.
Is he here tonight?
He is not.
Okay, and he provided the information that was on the survey based on the wrong datum?
So what happened, Mr. Grupo, is the initial survey was 88. The interim survey was 1929. That was given to Mr. Zacher, who then revised the plan based upon what he believed would carry through on the 88 datum. So you go from 88 to 29. Mr. Zacher gets the 29, believing it to be 88, submits it to Mr. McLarnin. He signs off on it, believing it to be 88. And in the field, we all know that base flood being such an important thing in Margate, Mr. Almeida now builds this, taking it out of harm's way for flooding. So now you've got a raised up pool, a raised up deck, further flood protection, a bigger house. While this is being built, the idea is this is great because now we've got additional flood protection that didn't exist before. We've got a pool up out of harm's way and a deck out of harm's way. All of that, the project professionals and the property owner believed in their good faith opinions, this is what we need to see built. When Anthony Almeida, and I'll testify to this, shot the height of the deck, he said this is just raising more pool and deck out of the floodplain. All of that is the purpose of the municipal land use law, certainly Margate's flood protection ordinance. It's unfortunate that it was based upon an incorrect survey.
Eric, even if the survey is 1.3 feet is the difference between 88 and 29.
Correct.
So if you take 1.3 feet off, you're still left with 20 inches, which would have required a variance anyway.
It was actually a little lower than that because when the property was demolished, there was a fair amount of excavation that was done, and then it was filled back in. So as it
Got
stands
it.
now, it looks a little different, but it would have complied almost perfectly. And then what happened was, when the new survey was shot as built, it was shot with the correct datum, and on the new survey, they're actually beneath where the house could go, where the deck and pool could go. So it's an unfortunate situation. As I said, it certainly went sideways, but based upon excavation, it's the perfect storm of a mistake, not the perfect
I'm
storm
just-
of an intent.
The first floor was shot correctly. The first floor is where it belongs. The first floor was shot correctly, and then the wall wasn't shot correctly. I just don't,
Because it was built first. When the initial survey was done, that was the datum that was used to build the house. Later, when they were moving out to the pool, it was incorrect data, but
okay.
here's
Well,
a little.
that answers a big question. It just,
And here's a
things
little
aren't
bit of
just
the
making
rub,
sense.
too. When, as everyone knows, certainly, the builders here, the plans that were on site were signed off by Mr. McLarnon, showing it buildable exactly as it is now, because he was led to believe, based upon Mr. Zacker's submission of the architectural plans based upon a bad survey, that that was the correct number. So you've got a guy building in the field what he believes is correct, but more importantly, it's signed off on by the zoning officer, the very guy at the city who's going to inspect it. So he's saying, I'm building what's been signed on. This was not construction of something that didn't already have city approval. You've got a stamp.
So the builder didn't know that that was wrong to put a 36-inch wall on the property
It
line,
was signed by the zoning officer.
and he doesn't know the rules of Margate.
Well, I would venture to guess that.
There was no variance requested for it. I mean, that's the,
Well,
again, I'm just trying to figure how are these people just not seeing this? That's my question.
I think respectfully, it's tough sometimes to understand where the ball is moving with regard to base flood, where you're supposed to be, height, distance to property lines. And I think when a builder in the field looks at a plan that's been signed by the zoning officer, he's relying on that, and he's saying, I'm building what I've got. And it's what he did in good faith.
We're listening a lot about the benefits of floodproof to the homeowner. Can you, moving forward with the rest of the presentation, focus on runoff and how the neighbors aren't going to incur a greater risk of flood now because of the raised elevation of this neighbor?
Yes.
And okay.
Absolutely. And perhaps it's time for Anthony, if you don't mind coming up and giving some testimony about our situation here. So Anthony Almeida is going to need to be sworn in. He is the president of Bayfront Properties Custom Homes and the builder on the project.
Okay. Eric just said it, but just state your name and address for the record. I'll swear you in.
Anthony Almeida,
And the business address?
2564 Industry Lane.
Okay. Industry Lane. I don't know where that is, but do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give you the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Where's that address?
Norristown, Pennsylvania.
Norristown, okay.
Anthony, you've been here, you've obviously been involved in the project from the beginning, and you're very aware of what has happened. You're the builder, you're responsible for the project. Explain to the board how we got here and what went into this construction, winding up with a deck and pool higher than would be allowed under Margate's land use ordinance.
So let me answer Mr. Patterson first. You asked a question in regards to, did the 9 steps carry into the rear of the home? It did. There's 9 steps, so it's 9 steps. It's a different application, but it's not 9 consecutive steps. If you look at the blueprint, it goes 3 steps. You're on a walkway that actually has a pitch. You make a turn, and then you have 4 steps to get to a deck. When you add up those number of steps, that datum point at the front carry to the rear datum point. So there's not 3 steps, because I can't give you, unless we had a dune in the back, there's no way that I can carry that through. So for clarification, that same amount of steps carried into the rear of the property.
With the pool deck in between?
With the pool deck in between.
Yes.
So I think that you
No,
felt
I
that there was
understand
3
that.
steps.
Well,
in the
whatever,
rear
I don't know the number of steps, but
Right.
it's just way more in the front than the back.
And that same problem that was picked up at the very beginning of the project carried into the rear of the project, for clarification. How we got there, I don't want to keep reiterating. There was a retaining wall on the print. There's datum points on the print. Everything that is built there was built the way the print was signed off on. The wall was high. Called building official, Jim came out, take a look at it. We all knew the wall was high, but the information on the print itself was accurate. It was built the way that the print was signed off 100% completely.
Well, according to, I'm sorry Roger's not here, but,
Sure.
and let me just paraphrase. I think what he said in his comments was it looked like a minor step up on what he looked at and signed off on.
Well, so that's not true. I'm not calling him a liar, but if you look at the print.
I know-
Yeah, so
I know you're not.
If you have the print here and it shows 3 steps, right, you can do some math.
Right.
8-inch riser times 3.
Okay.
Right? Then you have your walkway, then you have 3 more steps. It doesn't show you. The whole 3 steps back, you're already at over 18 inches. To hold the 3 steps back, is that making sense to you?
Uh-huh.
So if you look at the print that was approved, it shows 3 steps, right? We're already over the 15 inches that's allowed. You can't hold that back already. But the print was okay that way, so I built it that way, if that makes any sense to you.
It does, but are you aware of that it normally
I
would
was
need
not
a
aware
variance?
that it was 15 inches.
No, no, no.
Oh.
Were you aware that if it's over 18 inches, you would need a variance?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not?
No. So
How many houses have you built in town?
40, 50.
Okay.
So if you're asking me a question, I built.
I'm asking you.
No, so I'm
I'm-
just saying.
right.
I've never questioned in regards to if the information that was signed off from the city
Okay.
by all the officials
Right.
was correct. If you're asking me, it is my first situation that I was ever had to look at information that was that inaccurate. Now, if you're asking me that I know the 36-inch wall seemed wrong, absolutely.
No, 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 not
Well, I'm saying,
seemed.
but
it
if you're saying,
was right.
I didn't know the exact zoning, but
Right.
when it was built, it seemed obnoxious.
Right.
You're asking me a question, I'm giving you an honest
Right.
answer. Jim, you saw it, you know, it was high. You know, there's nothing more to say than, you know, there was a mistake that was made. There was nothing, it wasn't like there was like, I knew that I was trying to sneak something past or so forth and
I
so
don't
on.
think anybody's saying
It
that.
was complete, you know,
Screw up.
yeah, and also trying to, you know, give him Mr. Davis exactly what he paid for, knowing that there was 8 or 9 steps in the front of the home from the very beginning. The man pointed out from the very beginning he only thought he was getting 4. So trying to give him the convenience of trying to make this rear yard his main entranceway at this point in regards to comfort-wise. So if you have to think about it, so if you're going up 3 steps, going up a ramp, going up another, it's comfortable. So at least that's his main access at this point, that the man can get into his house instead of climbing up a ladder into the front of his home. And, you know, that's really what it came down to. It wasn't that this wasn't, you know, there was multiple conversations that happened during the entire construction of this house. And nobody was really kind of grasping it until it's built. We were in that office many of times trying to figure out, you know, the multiple things, even in regards to drainage.
But there's,
So if there's any-
every house built since Sandy just about has 9 steps, 10 steps. My house has 11 steps built since Sandy. I mean, it's not, you're not climbing up a ladder. That's the fact of life after Sandy, so.
But here's, you know, also, Mr. Patterson, there was a single-family home there on this large lot.
Right.
That was kind of built up. It wasn't that we had a home there that was the same size of the home was there. So it's awful misleading. And also the home there was not compliant at all. He had a patio in the rear yard that was kind of elevated and raised, that they pulled data points off of a concrete slab that actually wasn't even good numbers then, to be completely honest with you. They weren't good numbers because the way that the existing property was built and they surveyed it, whether it was 88 or 23 or 29 datum, they weren't good numbers because of the way that the property, the size of it, and it was a small single-family home, and it sloped and built up. So the drainage rolled off of it. So when you're shooting these numbers, and then you excavate it and you put a home that takes up the entire
You mean
property.
shooting the numbers before the house was torn down?
Exactly.
Okay, now I understand what
Exactly.
you're saying.
So, and again, I'm coming across passionately because there wasn't any type of negligence or anything that was happening from Margate side to our side. We basically had a client that we were trying to build the perfect home for, knowing that there was some disappointment from the very beginning. And that's where we're at today. I mean, there's nothing more that I can say to everyone on this board. I know that there's some issues in regards to drainage and how that's going to work. We can have conversations about that, but that how we got to where we're at today, and I don't know what else to say to you.
Let's have that drainage conversation now, because I think that's very important. In the event that the board considers all we put before them and allows this to go forward, you're the builder.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to come up with a way to properly drain everything on site and not have runoff onto your properties that surround. Can that be done?
absolutely can be done, but as a builder, I know the way to do it, but I would say to have a professional. We can have an engineer draw a French drain that catches everything, the depth, the way, how deep it is, the way it discharges off the property itself, discharges onto the street itself. So it's not like I can get out there and design it, and if it fails, or we can hire an expert to actually come up with that. You know, grab the downspouts, do it French drain, go down as far as we have to go according to an engineer, discharge it into the street, and it's very capable. Even the deck itself, excuse me, even the pool deck itself, there's perimeter drains that can be, we can pitch the patio pavers on the deck itself in such a way that it's caught on a perimeter drain that can be discharged to the street itself. So the
Let's be
only,
perfectly clear, Anthony, this is important.
Yeah.
Perfectly clear. If the board sees fit to grant this, the applicant, through you as the builder, will make sure and ensure that all water is drained correctly and that there is no runoff off-site, correct?
we would handle it in a little bit of along the same way we would handle any runoff on any larger projects. So we would actually have an engineer design it, and we would be 100% responsible for the building of that.
We would make sure that all drainage retained on-site and that this property would be responsible for its own drainage and it wouldn't go to the neighbor.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is getting ahead of a lot of issues, but would you accept that as a condition in the event that you were successful? As far as not just ensuring the drainage, hiring the engineer like you suggest?
Absolutely.
And that plan would be submitted to Mr. Wahlberg or Mr. McLaurin for approval. Obviously, to the extent that they signed off on it, then whatever means of keeping the water on site would be implemented and designed and built.
Did it ever occur to you that you were raising the yard 42 inches, the whole yard?
Absolutely.
And did you question anybody?
Mr. Galantino was out there because we both felt it was high.
This looks like it was built to have 3 steps to come down from the back porch to the deck of the pool.
Yes, sir.
3 steps.
So
And through the garage area, it's 3 long steps, correct?
So almost.
And they were bricked to have those steps come up originally.
So Craig, how it would work if I can take you from the Vendome side of the street?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were walking up the garage itself, there's 3 steps to a walkway.
Yeah, they're long steps.
That's right.
Right.
And that walkway actually, in the middle of it, has another step.
And that was on the original plan, to make those steps between the garage
Yes.
through there.
Yes.
To come up to that level.
Yes.
To make 3 steps to the
Yes.
finished floor porch.
Yes.
And out front was 8 steps, but back here was 3 steps.
No. So
That would work, but it's,
So out in the field, what you're
Black
asking,
one.
Craig, was on the print when it was drawn was bad information. In the field, we found out there was 9 steps that carried into the rear of the property. So what we end up doing, we had a little bit of ability to change the pitch of the walkway, which gathered up some steps. You have this long run at this point that we were able to change the pitch on that to actually make it a smooth transition because we had some ground to work with. Like give you, for instance, if the house set back off the street further and I had some land, 9 steps can turn 6 steps when you have land to work with to grade to. I had nothing to grade to. Those 9 steps actually come almost to the, if you look at it, comes to the property line. I had no land left, if that makes sense to you.
I also noticed that when you're standing on the coping of the pool, which would be the level of the pool grade,
Yes, sir.
the eaves are like 6 feet to the fascia boards of the garage. Right here.
So what is your question again to me? That
There's only
eve-
like 6 feet, it looks like it was, the garage was
It's-
built and then the ground was built up to it.
Well, the
You know,
garage is the retaining wall. So the garage itself is actually the retaining wall, and it was always built that way. Even on the print, the garage itself will have to be the backside of the retaining wall for the property. Right. The foundation of
For the
that
pool,
garage
for the-
itself,
for the pool.
exactly, was always built that way. Was always designed that way.
Just looks.
But you didn't expect to go as high.
Correct.
That's the issue.
Right. Exactly.
Any other you just waiting for more questions
I
from the
didn't know
board?
if anyone else had any more questions. at this point.
Did anyone have any more questions of Anthony?
Okay, I just want to have Mr. Zacher, plan architect, testify briefly about what he submitted to Mr. McLaurin. So Don, if you don't mind coming up here and giving us your expertise.
Mr. Zacher, just your name and address for the record. I'll swear you in.
Yeah, Donald Zacher, 101 North Washington Avenue, Margate.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And Mr. Chairman, we recognize Mr. Zacher as an expert, I assume.
Yes.
That you are a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey.
I am, yes.
And you prepared and submitted the plans that ultimately got built for this project, correct?
Yes.
Explain how we got from print one to what is built now in the field, from your perspective.
From my perspective, for every project, I rely on a survey and grades of the survey. And the documentation that would indicate that it's a proper year datum. In this case, the survey I got indicated a 1988 datum. So I'm not a surveyor. I don't know how to verify if it was in fact an 88 or some other year. It turns out that the grades were shot from a 1929 datum, but the survey in fact had indicated that it was the 1988 datum.
It's stated right on the survey, correct?
Stated on the survey. So every grade that I put on the drawings and every set of steps, whatever, was all based on the survey information I had. The survey was weird in that in the field, the numbers didn't add up. What I thought was the proper number of steps was actually not enough because the grade was actually lower. So we had it in the field, Oasis in the field, or Anthony in the field, had to add more steps because the grade was actually lower. And that was true around the entire site. So that's the genesis of the problem from the get-go, from the very, very beginning, from the early design sketches until now. And we're at a point where, innocently, the builder doesn't necessarily have expertise in the zoning code, so he follows the drawings. Roger McLarnon has to rely on what's submitted, and if it makes sense, then he signs off on it. But the drawings did indicate an elevated grade in the rear of the site, what we thought was proper, but it turns out that it wasn't proper because it was based on an inaccurate survey, starting elevation.
So Don, let's just walk through step by step here, which we've already discussed, but I think it makes more sense now that you've said it your way.
Yeah,
You're given a survey at the beginning of a job and you prepare the plans,
correct, correct.
Throughout the job, there were little minor adjustments here and there, and you were given another survey, which you then used to prepare a plan revision, correct?
Most recently, the drawings that I
Correct.
prepared for the submission for this variance application was based on an as-built survey with the correct elevations.
Now, the
True
as-built,
1988 datum elevations.
the as-built survey with the true 88 elevations
Right,
show a wall, calling it the patio wall,
right,
that is actually lower than what was allowed, correct?
correct.
But because it used the incorrect datum, if you went out to physically see it, it's higher than what is allowed, correct?
That's also correct.
All right.
Yeah,
So you submitted information to Mr. McLarnon to sign that you believed was based upon correct survey datum, but it was based upon incorrect survey datum. So when Mr. McLarnon signed that, everybody on the project believed it was the correct number and you could build to that height, but it turned out to be incorrect because it was off from the 29 to the 88 data.
that's correct.
I have a hard time, I'm just sorry, I really have a hard time, you're an architect and you're a damn good architect, that you can look at an elevation and say it's supposed to be 1.4 and it turns out double that.
At what
And you
point?
don't pick it up.
No, I didn't see it. I wasn't.
can you-
I was inside the house to check the framing during the construction. But in terms of the grading of the rear of the property, I didn't see that until it was built.
That, what I'm talking about is, you know you're not allowed to go above the 18 inches on it. So when you're drawing that, and I don't care what datum you have, that you see that it's above that somebody doesn't pick it up. Roger's only looking at it on paper,
You mean
what you give
physically-
him.
physically in
You
the
draw
field?
3 steps on there, he's figuring somewhere around
You mean
7
physically
inches
in
of
the
rise.
field, Mike?
Pardon?
I mean, physically in the field, seeing it.
Yeah, physically in the
Yeah.
field, because
Well, if
I'm
I
in the
walk
field,
on-
I'm not in.
If I walk on the site and the grade is there, I have no idea, looking at it, what the grade was underneath that originally.
But you knew where the floor height was of the house. You had that right. You had the
I
finished
had that
floor
right
height
if
of the
it was
house right.
noted that where it had to be based on the 88 datum, and that's where it was set. But I can't account for the grades.
Forget 29 and 88. You had the floor right. The finished floor of the house right.
And it was right.
It's still right. But how did that difference happen in the rear of the house to bring that up that high? I just can't get that through my head.
I don't know. I have to tell you, I really don't know.
I mean, you can draw it, but that's not what's over there.
Can I interject something here? It doesn't matter who's at fault here. It doesn't matter if it's Roger, it doesn't matter if it's me, it doesn't matter if it's you. That's really besides the point at this point. I don't understand how it was missed, just like you don't understand how it was missed. No, I know you're not. I know you're not, but it happened. So, you know, the surveyor, you, whatever, so I don't know how everybody missed this, but they did.
But I certainly think, Mr. Patterson, what did they know and when did they know it, as Mr. Cristaldi said, it's important because obviously when you look at it, the first question I would imagine every board member has is, how did this happen?
Well, it is the first question.
And there's
every
an
board member has.
explanation, which unfortunately, once it's built, really doesn't matter. Unless someone goes out 2 o'clock in the morning and builds something up and then says, oh, I got away with it, it doesn't matter. It's built unfortunately quite incorrectly, but it's built to the plan, and to say that everyone on site should have known, look, Don wasn't there every day, Anthony's there, he's got workers who are working, they shoot the transom to the wall, they say, build this up to this level, they do exactly what they're told to do based upon a signed-off plan by the city.
Right.
Now everyone gets together and says, wait a minute, how did this happen? And we're all, coming here before the board saying, we're aware of what happened, we now know what happened, but it's there.
Let me ask this question, a little off the subject. Was the pool put in after the wall was built, or was the pool put in first, elevated, and then the wall was built? Did the pool go in after the wall or before the wall? Before the wall. You can continue, Mike. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you got your answer? Well, you didn't. Well, you got the answer you're going to get.
I'd like to see the original.
Right. We don't have that.
We do.
Yes.
He wants the original print, that's what
I don't
you
have the
said.
original print. I can
Well,
bring it
that's
to
what
you.
he asked you for.
But I can answer your question that you asked of how you get to an elevation 12 and how you get good information to get your first floor of your house correct, but you have bad information on your grading. It seems, is that what you were asking? Because I can give you that answer. Well, the elevation 12, we're all shot at elevation 12 or 13 or whatever it is. You mark the pole 1988, you shoot it, right? That's done out in the field, had nothing to do with the survey that was handed to Mr. Zacher to design the home itself. An independent, and as you obviously know, Mike, we shoot that pole, you call it, that's a survey that we do out in the field based on, so we look at that print, it says elevation 12, we shoot that. He's using his design, when he's designing his home, he's using a survey from bad information, 2 different surveys shot at 2 different times. And you obviously know what I'm trying to say.
No, I can't get that through my head that you had it right, and then you confused it.
So you get a print,
Right,
elevation 12, Roger sees it, it's the right flood elevation.
Right.
We got that part right.
right,
Would you agree with that?
correct.
Okay. The grade elevation, taken from another survey,
Right,
okay, using bad information,
right.
shot 2 different times,
Okay.
not at the same time.
Gotcha.
You take that information that was bad.
Right.
You have one survey that was good, so the surveyor shot good and bad information, using 2 different atoms. He was going back and forth. Some of the stuff was good, some of the stuff was bad. So we get the 12 right,
Right,
and then the information of the grade around the property was from a whole nother datum.
suppose that elevation they gave you on the site was higher than the 12.
Say it was 13, which should have been 13.
Would you question?
Absolutely.
Why do we question?
When you say, would you question the 13, I would question the same way I question everything. I go to the experts, meaning Roger and/or Jimmy, to give me clarification.
I understand that.
That's how I would have questioned it. That's someone for asking me what's my protocol when I have a question. That is how I go to the experts that signed off on it.
Right. But it,
We're not going to get an answer to
I know,
your
but I was-
satisfaction. No, I
Yeah.
understand, but we need to move on from this. This doesn't affect the answer, so let's move on. Eric?
On behalf of the applicant, we have no other witnesses. You know, we certainly fleshed this out quite a bit, and the board's asked the right questions. Some of the answers were good, maybe not all of them, but we're at a point now where this is built. We believe that purposes of Margate's flood protection ordinance and the MLUL can be satisfied by granting the variances, as Mr. Davis testified to earlier, and a proper fence being put up on top of the wall that exists, which would allow privacy from within and without, and the neighbors are going to get a 6-foot-high wall, potentially with grass on top, maybe not, or they're going to get a 6-foot-high fence, potentially with grass on top, maybe not, whether or not this goes forward. So it's our belief that the variances requested can be granted without any substantial detriment to the zone plan of the city of Margate, and that the benefits still do outweigh any detriments, notwithstanding the fact that the deck and pool are built outside of what is allowed under your current zoning code.
I don't know how to phrase this question that it's not insulting, and I don't mean it to be, but I know the hardship the owner's going through no fault of his own, but that's not a hardship as defined as what a hardship is. Are you saying and with apologies, are you saying there's a hardship that meets our definition here?
I think there is. I think based upon the unique characteristics of this lot, you're on Vendome and Ventnor, and you've got very little visibility from either of those streets. You've got a property that had been excavated, and then land, soil, and fill were brought back to the property, overall creating a change in grade which was unexplained or unexplainable. So the hardship is not being able to obtain the correct ground point to work from in order to build up this wall. So hardship not necessarily in the size of the lot, but rather in the topography of the lot. So we talk about hardships. If you have a...
But the hardship is the mistake that was made. The hardship is not,
But even in its raw form, the land just existing without the...
and it gives me a knot in my stomach to even say that, but it's, from
I
our
do
perspective.
think, though, Mr. Patterson, there's a little bit more than that, because we're talking about the topography that existed, and then perhaps being a little bit too concerned about flood elevation, more fill being brought in, and new spot elevations being shot by the surveyor, albeit incorrectly, that Mr. Zacher uses to put on the plans, which are then used to create a bigger problem when the plans get signed by Mr. McLarnon and then is built in the field. So not with regard to the size of the lot, but with regard to the specific physical characteristics of the lot, which does qualify as a hardship. We believe that either under the hardship criteria or under the flexible C. So let's talk about that for a second. We've got the flexible C. What's built now is certainly not compliant with your zoning code. The flexible C allows the board to grant the variances based upon an alternative to what is currently there. And we think the alternative with the proper fencing, the proper design, the wall as requested by one of the neighbors, Mr. Davis was going to put a parge finish on it, perhaps even stone. What will be built will be more beneficial than what could be there with a plain old boring vinyl fence just going up 6 feet in the air. So I do think under either of those criteria, under the municipal land use law, flexible C, or under the hardship, the board does have the authority legally to grant the variances. Whether or not it chooses to do so in its vote, we're going to find out in a little bit. But as far as being entitled to get the grant, you've got that power. Okay, there's nothing stopping you from doing so. Some the neighbors may disagree, but legally you can grant this, and you should. But with that, we're going to rest.
Anything else from the board? Is there anyone here from the public? Not hearing anything. Come forward, state your name, your address, and then wait to be sworn in.
Name's Jack Scott, live at 3 North Wilson Avenue, Margate. Our property backs up to this property in question.
Mr. Scott, do you swear affirm testimony about the give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I just have a few little questions. First of all, I don't know if I can get this up here, so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
Can we use that?
Yeah. I'm going to mark that Scott 1 series of
Right, 'cause I know you
9
have-
photos.
I know you have the other
8 photos.
pictures there, the dam.
10 photos. 10 photos.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is everybody keeps talking about this wall and where it's at and what it is. You know, this is the back of my house. This is the back of 3 North Wilson Avenue, right? This is the retaining wall that was built.
Jack, you're not on mic, so you're going to have to speak up, just
Oh, I'm
because you're
sorry.
not on a mic. No, it's okay. The mic doesn't work.
Yeah, this is the retaining wall that was built, you know, and this retaining wall was built first, then the fill was put in, then the pool was put in. So this is the retaining wall here, and this is our house here, the back wall of our house, the back of our house, back at 3 North Wilson. One of my questions is, and I had asked this question numerous times of numerous people here in the city, and nobody's given me an answer yet. I don't know if I can get one here tonight, is from this wall here, from my back wall to this wall here, what is the proper distance? What should it be? I know here, this is a garage here. This is the house that was built behind me last year. I was told that this wall had to be 5 feet from my existing wall. So I'm assuming that this should be 5 feet from my existing wall, but I haven't gotten an answer on that yet. Nobody could tell me if it's supposed to be 5 feet, 6 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, I don't know. Right, but that's the wall there.
Jack,
As you can see-
Jack,
Go ahead.
that rule changed.
That rule changed?
Yes.
Okay. So what is it?
If it's because your house does not meet current code, there is no restriction anymore. That changed. I had to get a variance on my house because it was too close to a neighbor.
Okay.
And that changed after that. So I had to get a variance because I wasn't 5 feet away, even though it was the problem of the neighbors.
Yeah.
That rule was changed. So that's the difference between the 5 foot that was required before and it's not required now.
Now, that's within the past year, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
Mark's house
Yes.
was like
Yes.
last year.
Yes.
Yeah, Mark's house was last year. Now I lost my train of thought, but I was gonna say.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, I just, wanted to illustrate here so everybody can see, this wall here, this wall, the 4 foot, it's a 40-inch wall. It's a 40-inch block wall. It's not a fence. It's 8-inch block. To me, that's a block wall, a retaining wall, not a fence, right? So I believe what they're talking about doing is adding, you gotta add, a cap that goes on top of here, capping on top of here, which is usually about 2.5 inches, and then your fence on top of that. So that's where we stand, though. That's where everything is. And, the only questions I got, excuse me, Dan. The only questions I had the one about the 5 feet. The only other question I had was, on our block, on Vendome Avenue, there's 2 other pools on Vendome Avenue. One's on 3 North Vendome, the other one's on 6 North Vendome, right down the street. 3 North Vendome is directly across the street. Then 6 North is like 2 houses down from Dan's house. So they're there now, and they're both at grade level, and they've both been built within the past 2 years, both those properties. So, but they're all at grade level. They're not all elevated like this is. So, any questions of me? We've been in this house for 34 years. I'm a Margate resident my whole life. So,
Did you?
go ahead, any?
No.
Thank you, that's it?
I have a question. I have a question. Jack?
Who has a
You're
question?
saying the wall went first, then the fill, then the pool?
Yeah, the wall went first, then they had to fill it in, then you got your, that's why it's called a retaining wall, right?
He's got the pictures right there.
Jack, it's not clear. You're against this, or you're for this?
No, I just want to make sure that everything's within the code. what
Well, it's not
supposed to
within the
be.
code. That's what we're here
That's,
for.
well, that's why I was here tonight. What's in code, what isn't in code?
They can't build that, they can't do what
Because
they
nobody
did.
can answer me. Everybody keeps telling me it's your decision, but nobody tells me. what
Jack,
my
it's not your decision, it's our decision.
Okay.
If it was within the code, they wouldn't be here tonight. It's not within the code, they're asking for a variance from the code.
Yeah.
So Jack,
So-
the thing that's not in the code is that if a patio or whatever is built 18 inches and above, it has to abide by a certain setback.
Setback.
Okay, so that wall
In
is
code, the
higher.
wall would be where the house is.
Right.
So what we're saying then, Rich, is then, excuse me. Then this
No.
should have been originally 18 inches.
Correct.
This is the back wall.
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Mike,
yes,
right? So this should have been down around here,
Yes.
yes.
right? 18
About-
inches and then a fence
About
on
half,
top of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yes.
I'll leave them up there if you need to use them.
I just have a question for Scott.
Go ahead.
You understand that what's built now, if approved, will have a fence on top of it, correct?
Yeah.
And if all of that went away and was pushed back, there would still be a 6-foot-high fence
There would-
along that same line?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not as if that won't exist and nothing will exist. You're gonna have either 3 feet of block and 3
You're
feet of
either gonna
fence?
have an 18-inch wall and a fence,
Right.
or you're gonna have this and a fence.
Correct.
Right.
So once all that is done, just,
The other thing what we have to consider though, if we leave this and do a fence, or even if we go down 18 inches and do a fence, is you have your airflow and your sunlight back in here, which is gonna be affected, with whatever goes up here. Because if you can see here, this one picture here. You can look over here. Because Dan and I did talk, and at one point they were talking about a 6-foot fence, so I'm just showing what a
So
6-foot fence would look like.
so that's no longer an option, so.
No, on top of this.
Right, that's not an option.
Right.
So, just, and not to be adversarial, but maybe a little bit, you're gonna get a 6-foot-high fence, one way or another, whether it's 3 feet of block and 3 feet of vinyl fence, you will have from ground level to the top of the fence.
But if you take this down to 18 inches, now you have to have the setback, am I correct? So this is.
No.
No, no, you don't.
Setback, excuse me?
Now it needs a setback. At 18 inches, it would not need a setback.
Okay. So,
So Jack, the fence was gonna be on the property line, whether you have the wall there or
Right.
you have the whole fence. That fence is still gonna go right up to your property.
Right up to the property
Right up
line,
to the
correct.
property line. Yeah.
But the people on the inside their fence aren't at ground level with a 6-foot fence between them. They're now 3 feet higher with a 3-foot fence, so it is a difference.
right, so if you put a 4-foot fence on top, first of all, it's got to finish being filled in, it's not all filled in yet. Right, so now you put a 4-foot fence on top of that. Is what you're-
3-foot fence,
What, Rick?
3 foot.
3 foot, yeah. Well, this is 40 inches here.
Right.
Tom, you're right, it's 5 quarters a block. It's 40 inches.
So it's actually gonna be a little higher than 6 foot. It would be like 6'6" or something like that, if they only went with a 3-foot fence on top of the wall.
But if you only go with a 3-foot fence here, then you're standing here and you're looking, there's the one photo here, let me show you.
Pretty close.
Well, here, you're standing here, you're looking into my living space. And then over here, if you look, you're standing inside here, you're looking into a living space.
So would you prefer that, being the neighbor most
I'd rather
affected,
keep
would you
like that.
prefer that the fence was even higher than that?
I couldn't understand that, Chris.
Being that you're the neighbor most affected, would you prefer that the fence was higher than 3 foot or 4 foot?
4 foot, if you do 4 foot. What's that? No, if you do 4 foot, I can show you where you come in at. It's hard to see here. But you come in right at the bottom of this right here, it was 4 foot, I measured that, it's right at the bottom of that
Well, then-
capping there, it comes in at 4 foot.
And
So
then
Jack, a quick
then you have a
question.
7 or 8 foot wall there.
What's that, Rich?
Then you have a 7 or 8 foot wall there.
Tom, what'd you say?
A quick question. So basically what you're saying is that you would rather have it a 6-foot fence with them at ground level so they're not looking into your property?
I'd rather not be there at all. But it's
Well, you
there,
weren't
but
clear,
it's
Jack.
there. Yeah.
But as just, and by point of clarification, Mr. Davis pointed out, if the idea is looking into the window, if none of this were here at all, and you walked into the backyard to cut the grass, you're looking into that window. So,
But if this was done at ground level from the beginning, there would be a 6-foot fence there. It would be high enough to have some privacy, and he wouldn't have more than a fence. I think that's, Jack, you're very confusing as the way you're saying it, but that's.
I think he's in favor of
that's what.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah.
but I think that's,
Anything else, Jack?
No.
Anybody else
Before you get
testify?
into trouble here, no, I'm done. Yeah.
Please,
I'll leave them up there?
Yes.
Will you leave them, right?
state your name and address and
My
then
name
be
is
sworn in.
Bob Huey. I live at 8603 Ventnor Avenue. I'm a friend of Jack
Wait,
Scott's for
wait,
many
wait,
years.
Wait,
Hey, Mr.
be
Huey, do
sworn in.
Pardon me?
you
You
swear
need to be
affirm, do
sworn in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm a friend of Jack Scott's, but I'm also a long-term professional planner in the state of New Jersey and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, a charter member, which clearly means that I'm old. I've been doing this for a little while. So tonight I'm here as Jack's friend, but also as his planner. I didn't know how to prepare for tonight, so at this point, some of the things I might say.
Mr. Huey, just because you're testifying as a planner, we just got to qualify you. So just tell the board a little bit about your background and
Fine.
education. I mean, I know you, but.
I've been a planner since the mid-'70s. I practiced in Atlantic County for a number of years. I taught planning at Stockton College. My planning office was always in Margate, but I never practiced in Margate. I think I've been in front of this board twice for 2 reasons. One, I didn't think it was fair to practice where I live, and I thought it was easier on me and my family not to practice here. So I appeared in front of this board one other time.
You've appeared before municipal land use
I've
boards.
represented numerous communities in Atlantic County. I've done zoning ordinance for many communities. I've done master plans for many communities. I've represented a number of private clients. At one point in time, as many of you know, I enforced all the environmental rules for the state of New Jersey as the environmental commissioner for the state. So I think my credentials are satisfactory.
Okay.
I'm not saying they're great.
I just needed to get them on the record.
No problem.
And you obviously accept him as an expert.
Yeah, okay.
I might be a little.
Continue.
I don't blame him at all. Listen, I might be a little repetitive because until I walked in here tonight, I hadn't seen the zoning officer's review. There's one thing I think probably ought to be corrected because getting it that late doesn't give anybody time to prepare, the applicant or the people who want to appear. And it would save the board a lot of trouble if people knew in advance what the reviews were going to say. So I came prepared, first of all, to talk about C variances. I don't have to do that. I've never seen so many C variances in my life in front of a board as I have tonight. But I think this one's different. To give somebody a C variance, you have to find for the positives and the negatives. Okay? There's nothing unique about this piece of property. What's unique about it is self-inflicted. There's nothing that's going to be positive for the community as a result of the C variance. As a matter of fact, I can think of a number of ways that's going to adversely affect your zoning ordinance. As a matter of fact, I think you're going to either have to change a whole lot of definitions, or you're going to have to review a whole series of things as variances. Let me give you an example. First of all, a pool under your ordinance is an accessory use, shall be an accessory use. In this plan, is now constructed. I mean, we're not talking about something we imagine we might see. This has been constructed. In this plan, a pool is now a part of a patio. In this plan, a pool is now a part of a patio that is 40 inches up in the air. In this plan, this pool is a part of a patio that now becomes a part of the principal use. Minimum setback for principal use is 10 feet. Proposed is now 0. That's pretty inconsistent with at least 2 pieces of your plan. Second part, when did we start to call retaining walls fences?
Can we go back to your first part?
Yes.
I just want to clarify. So you're saying that the pool is the accessory use, so the patio around the pool, so it's all part of an accessory use that
Well,
must
no, I'm
meet a
saying
10-foot
that, I'm
setback?
saying that your zoning code classifies pools an accessory use.
Okay,
Shall be an accessory use.
right.
All of a sudden, this pool and the deck around it is now being talked about as a part of the principal structure. Therefore, it requires a 10-foot setback on both sides. It proposes a 0 setback on both sides.
Bob, you're saying that that became an appurtenance by being elevated and attached to the house? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, anything that's elevated to this extent becomes a part of the principal. I mean, that's your code. That's what it says. So therefore, it's a part of the principal building. And setbacks apply. So you'd be waiving that as well. I guess that's another C variance. Now, that's another thing that I would point out. I've seen C variances. I've seen them tonight. But I very rarely have seen more than one C variance on one application. And this advertisement includes more than one C variance and such other relief as may be required. And what I'm suggesting to you is that that relief is enormous. If you can somehow find your way to justify this as a C variance, which I don't see how it's possible. But if it were possible, then you have to be willing to grant a whole series of other variances. I haven't even thought of them all. But, you know, the first thing is we're calling a wall a fence. This is not a fence. This is a wall. If it was 18 inches high, then, first of all, I'm not sure that it's not supposed to be, it's not on the property line, but let's assume it can be 18 inches high and on the property line under the new ordinances. Okay, that's possible. The fence would be.
It didn't change between new and old ordinance.
The fence would be in back of it, because fences are supposed to be on the property owner's side of the property. So the fence would be in back of it. So now we're talking about a fence that, for your pool requirement, is 5 foot high, and in front of it, a wall that's 18 inches high. So we don't have to do a lot of math here. It's not 40 inches and 48 inches, you know, it's not a 4-foot fence in it. It's a 6 foot or 5 foot fence, could be 6 under your ordinance, but it's not on top of an 18 foot or 18 inch wall. It's just not. So we're either you're gonna change the definition for fence, now that includes both. I've seen the definition for fence in this ordinance. Open slats, nothing about a solid structure. So this can't be a fence no matter what they want to call it. Okay. I want to say that I think I understand that there's an overwhelming amount of applications in this city, and everybody's overworked. I'm not buying the fact that a bunch of professionals made a mistake here. I mean, there were many opportunities to correct that mistake. This house, well, if let's grant that There was a mistake made, and in 1988, it should be 1 1/3 feet higher than 1929. 1 1/3 feet is 16 inches. Easily correctable. It would have been corrected instantly if somebody would come in and said, you know, we think we have a problem here. And it's hard to imagine that somebody wouldn't notice that problem. The second thing that I want to say in that regard is nobody could miss all this. Now, I think, I don't hold the owner responsible. It's not his fault. I'm not sure that I hold the professionals responsible because it could have been corrected. Once, twice, how about when it came in for flood review? How about, and I know there's a difference of opinion on this, and I'm not sure what the real fact is, but it's my understanding that when you build this is from builders in Margate, that when you build a pool, you have to come back in with the pool for a pool permit, and that pool permit has to have a survey and it has to go to the zoning officer. Now, I've also been told that that's not correct, which, by the way, would come as a big relief to the builders that I've talked to. But it is required, I've been told. Okay. So let's get down to facts here. This isn't the owner's fault. Yeah, I mean, would he like fewer steps? You said that. You know, did somebody try to accommodate that by putting in fill? They did. I don't think we can hold him responsible, but I think the developer should know. Before I came here tonight, I was prepared to say that these people are not rookies in this game. I was going to say they built 20 to 25 houses that I know about. The builder himself tonight said 50 to 55. The ordinance is clear on what survey is required and when it's required. The ordinance is clear on all these other things. There's no mystery here. So we look at this and we go, is this a hardship? You know, it is a hardship, but not on this owner. Hardships are not because we want to say oops when it's all done. Hardships are not because we made a series of mistakes. That doesn't meet the standard. It's a hardship on the adjacent neighbors. And I want everybody here to know, including the owner of this property, that Jack and Dottie Scott are really nice people. They hold the keys to most of their neighborhood because their neighbors aren't here all year round. They're not trying to give anybody trouble. They merely want the board to do the right thing. And the right thing is clearly not to go, if this pool would have been built where it was shown repeatedly, there wouldn't be a variance required here. Not a single one. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public, please come forward, state your name and address, and then wait to be sworn in.
Dennis Sit from 1 North Wilson,
1 North Wilson.
What was
How do you
your
spell your
last
last name?
Citron.
Citron. You swear affirm testimony about the guilt, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I've been in my house since 1985, and I'll attest to Jack and Dottie Scott. They have a key to my house. They're great neighbors. And I've been listening to the testimony at the board, and I feel sorry for the Harrises. The Davises, I'm sorry, forgive me. I sometimes mess up my own name. Ask my wife. I guess the question is, who hired the surveyor? Why isn't the surveyor here today to testify? I'm assuming the survey was hired by the builder. And if so, the builder is the leader, the captain of the ship. He hires the surveyor, Unfortunately, if the surveyor supposedly screwed up, as was testified, there's a problem. Now, Bob did an articulate job here testifying because he's an expert. I cannot say anything more than what he said, except I feel sorry for them. And the hardship, as you pointed out, is not a hardship that is accountable here. My concern is I am not affected as much as Jack and Dot because I'm over here. That wall does not really affect me as much as them. But I do have a problem with regards to the water. So if, and I'm not going to tell the board what to do because I can't. If for some reason you give them the variance, which it's up to you, I want to make sure that the drainage is done, not if there's a problem, have it done now. Because
That was a condition of
okay,
the, if it
I
happened, it
heard
would be a
it,
condition.
but I just want to make it perfectly clear. And the reason I'm saying that is that I have concerns that if it's not done immediately, it'll never get done. Jack and Dot had a problem with regards to when the house was being built, that they messed up their slate and they were supposed to fix it. Well, it's only been over a year and still hasn't been fixed. So that's my concern. So, I can't say anything more than what Bob says and what Jack says. Obviously, the board knows a lot better than I do. Well, I should hope so. And this is an unfortunate situation, and you guys have a tough decision to make. Because sometimes you can't use your heart, you gotta use what's right. And sometimes what's right is not right. Somebody's gonna get hurt, and sometimes it's unfortunate. But people should be accountable. And I'm curious why the surveyor wasn't here today. He could have clarified a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public? Please come forward, state your name, address.
Sandy Vespertino, 38 Chelsea Court, Atlantic City, New Jersey. And
Bob.
Mr. Vespertino, do you swear affirm the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
I
truth?
do.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to talk about the Davises and what they've gone through. I realize this is really a tough situation you guys are in. I've been in your seats before for many years. I know what it's like being on that side of the table and hearing both sides and having to make a tough decision. I just think that you need to weigh the possibilities, if you were to vote no, on what that would mean as far as correcting this, because it would really be a lot entailed to it. A lot of the brick walls that surround the pool and the house, the starting courses were laid out 3 or 4 courses below grade that was established by the pool. That would mean that the walls would have to come down in the garage, on the house, and, again, it's just a real hardship, not in the way that you look at hardships as far as making the case, just the way what it would mean if this was turned down, what's involved in the progress, in the plan. We all know about the surveyor. I agree too that he probably should have been here too. And I'm just hoping that you guys can come to some type of agreement that might work out for both the neighbors and the Davises, because they're good people. Jack and Dot, I know them all my life. We've worked together. His dad and my dad worked together. They're great people. So I just hope that you guys can come up with something that might help both people out here. And again, I know what it's like to be in your seat. And I think you guys handled yourselves very professionally tonight. I'm very impressed with your board. And that's all I have to say, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public have any comments, questions? Public portion is closed. Any further comments from the board? Would you read the motion, please?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions of me? I would just focus on the application, not who did what, and Mr. Goldstein presented that as part of his application, and I think it was necessary to give some background, and that opened the door to some questions back and forth. But as far as your vote, I don't think from both perspectives, should focus on the planning issues. So what we'll need is a motion to...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Would anyone be willing to make any adjustments here? So, I mean, between the consumers and the
May we have a
neighbors
minute,
and
Mr. Manos? It's been a long night, and obviously, maybe a second would be...
I mean, there was a bunch of bad mistakes, and there's some, it's all over the place. Is there any way to make the consumer happy and the neighbors happy? I don't know.
Perhaps just a short break to discuss before we, call the vote. If the board sees fit, okay.
And that doesn't guarantee any change
No,
from the
obviously,
board,
but-
it's just if you want to present
This
something.
board is, always interested in making resolutions.
Well, no, you can't, but wait, we discussed with your client, you haven't offered anything. I just wonder why you're going to offer something now.
Well, nothing's really been requested, and we haven't had a chance, respectfully to Mr. Scott, to hear what he had to say until tonight.
Well, I think,
What he has said was, we
I
wanted
thought
to-
the neighbor said he had talked to Mr. Scott, or Mr. Scott said he had talked to the applicant. Have you guys talked, you and the,
I've spoken to Jack several times, as I see him outside, and
Right.
always asked him how he felt about things, and his comment was always, whatever the board decides. That's just, whatever.
So perhaps, one last chance to see if there's any way to do it, and if not, then we'll...
well, you got 5 minutes. We
All right.
can't, it's late, so.
No, I would propose,
Well, let me ask, Mr. Scott, do you want to discuss any compromise?
Yeah, do you want to have a recess?
I'm asking, would you agree to a 5-minute recess to discuss anything with the,
Yeah, sure.
okay, 5-minute recess.
All right.
Mr. Goldstein?
it appears as if there is not a true compromise available for all of the parties. Based upon that, we would rest. I would ask for a vote and go from there.
Okay. Did you already read the motion? or
No,
read
I
it
did
again?
not read the motion, so someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief to permit the decks and patios, since they're over 18 inches from grade, they're required to have 10-foot setbacks, and that's along the back side, the two sides, and the requirement's 10 feet, and they're right on the property line at 0 feet.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Jim,
Tom Collins?
A lot of case over some dirt, basically. To be quite honest, I did not believe anything that was presented tonight in defense of this. There is no hardship. There's no hardship for the city. We're not here to correct contractor errors, whether they're costly or not. That's what insurance companies do. I think the only one that really got it tonight was Mr. Huey, who used to be a professor of mine 30 years ago, but we're not going back that far. He hit it right on the money. This is really, it's a shame. It should have been caught. I know, I've built homes. There's a spike in the telephone pole that they put in, the surveyor does, at the 88 datum, and it's still in the telephone pole. And when you shoot, you go off that spike. If they decided not to use the spike and build the pool, that's their problem. But there's no hardship for us. I vote against the application.
Clem Wozleski?
Well, obviously, somebody made an error here, and that error just kept compounding or ignored. From what's been said tonight, we really can't place it. I think the owner is an innocent victim somewhere along the line. and it's really a shame. Perhaps the remedy is legal to establish who is responsible and make them correct the error. So I have to vote against the application.
Rich Patterson?
I'm voting against the application. To me, like I said, it turns my stomach for the applicant. I feel he is an innocent person here, but I asked the question, I got an answer that it was a hardship. I don't see anything in the definition that this is a hardship that we can accept as a hardship. It specifically says that it cannot relate to any personal or financial hardship that you suffer. It's related to the property on the narrowness, showerness, irregularity, exceptional topographic conditions, or other unique conditions. I just don't see a hardship here. The other thing which makes me I don't see any way I could vote for it is there's nothing positive about this for the city or the neighborhood. The only positive is the owner walks down fewer steps to his pool. With those facts of the case, I cannot vote yes. I vote no.
Mike Cristaldi?
With Mr. Patterson, I feel really bad for the owners. It's not their fault. And I still can't get it through my head that you got one thing right and you didn't get the other. I can't vote yes on this. I feel as though a 40-inch high block wall is a structure, not a retaining wall. So that's probably my biggest problem. So like I said, I vote no.
Jim Galantino?
I mean, I've asked our solicitor every way possible how to explain a hardship. Even Rich stated the definition of a hardship. I even looked at the flexible C variance, which is a variance that allows for flexibility on what Mr. Huey was testifying to. And that doesn't even give any benefit to it says the benefits of the deviation from the local zoning ordinance resulting in granting advantage would substantially outweigh any detriment. And it really doesn't, there's nothing to outweigh. I mean, I read that sentence like 5 times and it just never worked. And I for that reason, I have to vote no.
Margaret Gubernalty?
This is just a bad situation that did unfortunately get worse. No one noticed. Right on down the line, I don't think that there was any ill intent. I mean, it was bad survey datum. I tried to, as a negotiator in life, try to make this work for the parties and the consumer, but we're unable to reach an agreement. As a planning board member, I cannot validate a hardship or a C variance here, or even a flexible C, like Jimmy said, so I have to vote no.
Mike Richmond?
As a planning board member, I really have to follow what's written in regards to the definition of a C variance and the rules of the city, and I really don't see how I could vote for that, knowing what I know. So I'm going to have to vote no.
Application fails 0-7.
Thank you.
Board members, please don't leave. We have discussion.
No, we have to keep Aaron for this one. Tough one. Huh? Yeah, we will. No, we are. We're not going to go over the master plan. Where are you going now?
Yeah,
Did you just leave yourself?
Yeah, invitation.
Nice.
Money? Can I open it?
We should all go to gas.
Can I open it?
Is this bribery?
I'm gonna make a deal and have my office go. I'm not gonna be here.
Are we allowed to go?
I'm not gonna be here. I'm not gonna be here. Wanna bring you somewhere? Don't understand.
I'm gonna be in Venice. I'm gonna be in Venice.
I mean, don't post
Craig,
it on.
give me your credentials so I can bring somebody with me.
I mean, don't post it on Facebook.
I won't be here.
Yes.
I heard it no one.
I did too.
That's a
I
Friday
thought it was a
night.
travesty.
I'm in. That's the Margate Memorials. I might go.
Johanna? What do we have to discuss? Wait.
Okay. There has been a situation that has arisen with the adoption of the master plan and the ordinance, chapter 175, that you're supposed to be reviewing. The problem is it's more than a year out, and our solicitor for the city, Scott Abbott, states that if it's more than a year out,
You mean from the time the master plan was adopted to the time the
Adopted.
ordinance was done?
to this time where the ordinance has
Okay.
been introduced. What occurs with this time frame is anytime you change a zoning
Boundary.
I was going to say barrier.
Or classification.
You need to notify everybody who is included in the change, plus a 200-foot parameter around that change. At this
5,000 homes.
point, this would be close to 5,000 line items, because it is not just the hotel zone, and it's not just the Washington Avenue pedestrian corridor. It goes back to Margate Terrace, where that zoning has changed.
$7 times
At-
5,000.
At $6.48 for a piece of certified mail. So what has been proposed to be a more efficient, effective way, as well as economical, is we are going to reintroduce and amend the master plan. That will start the clock for the year over again. And that way, we can do fine tuning in the master plan and then change our chapter 175 land use. Okay,
That means we get to leave early tonight?
that means we don't really need to discuss it at length.
We can get out of here?
But this is why tonight, I don't know how many people have spoken to Roger about the changes that they felt should be included, but you really do need to address any changes with him so that at our next meeting, we can introduce the proposed amendment to the
And please,
master plan.
if you have problems or questions, talk to him directly. If you feel it's something you want changed, then please let the rest of the board, everybody has the emails, so we're not sitting at the following meeting discussing something that had just come up. So talk to Roger. If you feel it needs to be done, then let everybody else know what your particular thing is.
Clem, you're allowed one.
Hard to believe that I'm saying that we don't
I
meet
need
at a bar, but
microphones
we
on.
meet someplace and sort of
Yeah, I
review this.
totally agree with
Well, I don't know if we
Well,
can do that.
you-
We can't do that.
You can't. You gotta have to do it at a public meeting, or if there's a subcommittee that's formed.
Yeah,
with
but then everybody
three,
can't
I
come.
think we
Right.
can do it. No more than
We
three.
can't- we
We
can't
can't
do
form a
that.
quorum, no.
Because I mean,
Violates
Clem's
the
got like
law.
over 200. So it's,
I'm saying that it needs to be, if you go I talked to Roger the other day. There was a mistake on the driveways. He said it was in there. There's 38-foot driveways out in the town. We intended to restrict that. 10 foot for single car, 20-foot for a car, but it said minimum. The wording, he took that out, that it now is fixed. So there's, you know, if you find things like that, talk to Roger about it, but don't wait, we were supposed to have this done 2 weeks ago. I talked to Roger the other day, Clem came in a week, and of course, and then Roger was gone for a week. But he was gone for a week after the 2 weeks was already up.
I talked to Roger a week ago, and I'm fine.
We can't, no more than 3 people can talk about it.
Which needs to be advertised.
Right.
You can do it at the conference room on Union Avenue, but Joanna has to advertise that we're meeting at 2 in the afternoon.
And the public has to be invited, don't
So
they?
it's got to be a public
Right.
meeting,
Yeah.
sunshine law.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can't participate, but they can come and listen.
Well, then
That's
you got to do it here then.
Well, why not do it here, whatever, but it's, I'm saying we,
We can do it anywhere we choose, other than the log cabin. We can't.
So
We're all
we
on
go to
record
Richie's
here.
pool and you can rate on us?
If I advertise that the
Mr. Chairman,
meeting's
to
held
you.
there.
See, I thought I got up one.
Well, all right, so that being said, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with having a separate meeting if we get to advertise it, whatever.
We are not
instead of
under
like-
the pressure that we were to have it done immediately.
Right.
The
But
pressure is,
I'm still not into like, so we're gonna miss next month, so now it's gonna be in September. So I'm sure we're gonna have a big load of cases. So, you know, now we're gonna be getting out, now we're gonna be getting done at 10:30, 10:45, then we're gonna discuss this master plan thing? I mean,
then if no one minds, we'll look into sometime during September. I mean, there's only so many Thursdays I can have meetings.
Rich, I've got a suggestion.
but we've already, we've had a year or over a year now to do this. So to come up with, you know, there's certain things to look at and say, look, we talked about the driveway widths. We talked about it, it only said oceanfront decks. We talked about the block. That's what we're looking at now. We're not looking to rip this whole thing apart. That
No.
ship has sailed. So if you have things that are wrong or not with the intent of what we thought, that's what we need to talk to Roger about. And then if it's big enough, he lets everybody know. So we shouldn't have to have a separate meeting about this.
All right.
This is a year, this is not something
That's
new.
why you're chair.
But this is not something new.
And the other thing is, if we make make changes, and then we have a couple applications, and we said, it's not like we're precluded from making another change.
We
down
can
the
always
road.
add
We can always
something.
add something.
Yeah. Well, we've made some already, we've already done that. But we can always
You
do
guys
that,
are.
but we're trying to get this master plan process done.
And it's never going to be perfect. It will always take
There'll
amendments.
always be changes.
Amendments are commonplace.
And we see unintended consequences when we change things. We see unintended consequences. And we're not geniuses enough to avoid unintended consequences. So there's always going to be changes, but let's get this plan done. But make sure that the items we talked about over the past year, not a lot of new issues, over the past year, are in there and are the way we want them.
Has everybody read it? I did the whole book.
There's things, another thing, I talked to, wait a minute, one at a time, and I'm talking.
Yeah, because
The one thing he added, right now, the garages can't be 5 feet from a neighbor's property. Well, he added 3 words at the end of the sentence, also on the inclusive property. That's gonna create hundreds of variances, and I talked to Roger about it, and I've talked to builders about it, and I've talked, not just you guys, I mean other builders. We have small lots in Margate. I mean, we're cutting another 2 feet off. We've gotten by with 3 feet all these years with nobody dying from a fire because of that. They go around the other side of the house.
You're talking about the alleyways, right?
Between the garage on your property and your house on your property, not the next door neighbor's property. The way it's worded now, the way it is now, it has to be 5 feet from the neighbor's property.
That's what it says.
But the new one says also your property, so that's a
No, we don't want
problem we want to fix.
we don't want that, right?
No, but that's what's in there. That's a correction.
Right.
Yeah.
We want everybody to park under.
All right, so with that being said, with that direction, do I hear a motion to adjourn? All right, a second, we're adjourned.
So